Chapter 1. The Inciting Incident. The morning air in the grand salon of Clarendon House was crisp with unease. Heavy drapes of emerald damask framed tall windows overlooking the manicured gardens, but no bird dared sing under the weight of anticipation. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, had scarcely set foot into that august chamber when an uneasy silence greeted me, one that spoke of a gathering far more tense than polite society would admit. Monsieur Hercule Poirot, impeccably turned out in his charcoal frock-coat and immaculate starched collar, stood by the mantelpiece, his waxed moustaches quivering ever so slightly. He regarded me with those sharp, calculating eyes, attuned not to trivial pleasantries, but to the invisible threads of human deceit. Mon ami Hastings, he began in his lilting French accent, you see before you a collection of the finest horological specimens in all of England and, perhaps, in all of Europe. Yet, among these treasures, a darker mechanism hides. He swept his hand toward an ornate display of clocks, an imposing grandfather clock with delicately painted dials, gilt brass carriage timepieces in glass cases, and one peculiar object that drew the eye by its absence of ornamentation, a simple walnut clock, its face marred by a single crack across its porcelain surface. At that moment, footman Butler entered with a silver tray bearing a small leather pouch. Monsieur, he announced, bowing low, the clockmaker's body has been found in the workshop. He is dead. A collective gasp rose from the assembled guests. Lady Winifred Hargrave, her lattice of pearls glinting in the lamplight, clutched her fan to her breast. Sir Reginald Peabody, stoic until now, drained the sherry in one strain of the throat. Even the usually impassive Inspector Grant looked momentarily shaken. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And so, Hastings, the affair begins. He turned that inscrutable gaze upon me. Observe how each face here tells its own story of guilt or innocence. We shall see which masks fall first. Chapter 2. The first Clouser workshop lay beyond a narrow corridor off the salon. Its heavy oak door swung wide as if by an unseen hand. Monastic silence reigned, broken only by the soft scrape of Monsieur Poirot's polished boots on the flagstone floor. I followed close behind, my heart thudding with the twin beats of dread and curiosity. Stepping inside, I saw the body of Mr. Aurelius Finch, the celebrated clockmaker whose creations graced the world's finest halls, slumped at his workbench. His once meticulous tools lay scattered across the surface, tweezers, tiny screwdrivers, and the delicate cutters used to shape gears no larger than a lady's thimble. A penknife, its blade stained a faint copper hue, rested half open near the victim's right hand. Inspector Grant moved forward to inspect the scene, but Poirot raised a slender finger. No, my friend. Let us first observe with fresh eyes. He circled the bench slowly, his gaze flicking from one object to another as though each were a puzzle piece waiting to be set in place. Note the position of the body. Poirot murmured to me, voice low yet clear. Seated, one might say, as though he fell mid-thought. He pointed to a half-sketched diagram of a clock escapement pinned to a cork border, drawing interrupted by a smear of grey dust. And this, he added, tapping the board with the tip of his cane, the charred residue of metal filings. Unusual for a simple workshop. As we spoke, Grant knelt to examine the floor beneath the bench. Footprints, sir, he said, and a single glove. He held up a slender black kid glove, its wrist torn as though it had been yanked free. Was it his? No, Poirot replied. Mr. Finch always wore both gloves, yes, but of different colours, one white, one cream-an affectation, Nessie. Pa, he shook his head. This black glove belongs to someone else entirely. I looked around the dimly lit room. Shelves of clock cases lined the walls, each containing a timepiece in various stages of assembly. A polished mahogany cabinet stood against the far wall, its glass doors ajar. Inside, clocks of exquisite intricacy ticked in eerie concert. Poirot approached the cabinet and ran a gloved finger along the glass, leaving a faint smear. Whoever entered here last did not intend to leave any evidence, he observed. Yet evidence there is. He tilted his head and studied the fingerprints. Notice how they are partial, wiped away with conscious care. And yet the lower sash remains untouched. The culprit did not expect the clocks to be read by time. Yes, Grant nodded, impressed. Astute, as always, Poirot. A man might walk in carrying a satin handkerchief, Poirot continued. He might clean his prints. But he forgets that a workshop of this nature is designed to capture dust. The residue clings to every surface, thus revealing what the gloved hand sought to conceal. He turned to me with a triumphant glint in his eye. Hastings, look at this. Pulling a small vial from his coat pocket, he uncorked it and brought it near the dust. I collected this before anyone else touched the scene. See how it fluoresces faintly under this lamp. He held a polished magnifying glass by a shaded lamp, and a cold, greenish glow illuminated tiny flecks of a chemical compound. Chemical filings, he explained, likely from a specialized alloy. The black glove was dusted with these filings before entering. The culprit is familiar with Mr. Finch's trade, perhaps even complicit in his business. I frowned, following his lead. So the glove belonged to someone within his circle of craftsmen, or someone who wished to appear as such. Poirot's eyes drifted to the open door. Let us return to the salon and question our suspects about their knowledge of special alloys. We replaced the glove and cuffed the vial carefully before returning through the corridor. In the salon, the guests had formed small knots of uneasy conversation. Lady Winifred Hargrave stood near a window, her white gloves clasped as though she held back a tremor. Sir Reginald Peabody's jaw was set in rigid determination. Even Inspector Grant wore a look of tense expectation. Poirot began with Lady Hargrave. Madame, you were speaking with Mr. Finch last evening. Tell me, did he mention work on any new project? She smoothed her pearls, voice steady but eyes distant. Yes, Monsieur Poirot. He was commissioned to restore an heirloom clock belonging to Lord Clarendon himself. But that commission was routine, nothing beyond his usual expertise. And this heirloom, asked Poirot, did it involve any unusual metals or alloys? Only gold, silver, and standard brass, she replied. Nothing exotic. Poirot inclined his head. Thank you, madame. He crossed to Sir Peabody. Sir Reginald, I understand you arrived late last night. You hosted a dinner at the Clarendon House dining room. Did Mr. Finch attend, sir? Peabody's gaze darted momentarily toward Lady Hargrave, then back at Poirot. He did, briefly. He spoke only of his work, then retired to his workshop very late. He cleared his throat. He seemed distracted. Distracted, yes, Poirot repeated softly. By what, do you think? Peabody's lips twitched. He mentioned a complication. Something about the gears refusing to mesh properly. Refusal to mesh, Poirot mused. Interesting phrase, n'est-ce pas? He leaned closer. Did he seem troubled by this? He did, but I thought little of it, Peabody admitted. I had other matters to attend to. Poirot nodded and strolled toward the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back. Hastings and the inspector gathered at his side. "Observe how Sir Reginald speaks with reluctance, yet Lady Hargrave was adamant about the alloys. Both speak truths, but neither mentions the missed payment. Insolvent affairs." I asked softly. Poirot tapped his chin. "Ah, Hastings, already you weave possibilities. Mr. Finch's business, though esteemed, suffered from irregular accounts. A partner might be tempted to desperation." Inspector Grant frowned. "You mean to suggest foul play for financial gain?" "Among other motives," Poirot said crisply. "We must excavate each layer." At that moment, Butler entered with a small envelope addressed to Monsieur Poirot. The wax seal bore the insignia of a clockmaker's cog. Poirot's eyes lit with excitement as he opened it, revealing a single sheet of fine parchment. "The truth ticks but once. Seek the gloved hand in the gallery at midnight." A collective hush fell. Lady Hargrave's hand flew to her throat. Sir Peabody's hand trembled as he poured himself another glass of sherry. Poirot refolded the note carefully. A challenge. He proclaimed, "Someone knows that I will piece together these clues, but seeks to mislead. The mention of the gallery. What clock stands there? The Great Hall's astronomical clock, perhaps. And midnight, Mondieth, is the hour when shadows blend." He faced the assembled group. "We shall reconvene at the gallery tonight. Until then, each of you remains under my gentle scrutiny. The first clues we have uncovered point us to a practiced hand in alloys, a torn glove, and now a taunting message. The game is afoot, Hastings, yet the solution lies hidden within these seemingly disparate fragments." As the guests drifted away to ponder their fates, Poirot's gaze settled upon the walnut clock in its simple case. Its cracked face caught the light, as though winking in secret knowledge. "Remember, Hastings," he murmured, "in mysteries, the simplest object often conceals the deepest truth." And with that, he strode from the room, leaving me to wonder what secrets the gears of human nature would expose when turned by his little grey cells. Chapter 3. The Gathering of Suspects. The gallery was a lofty chamber lined with ancestral portraits and dominated by the great astronomical clock, its brass arms gleaming in the afternoon light. A hush fell as Monsieur Poirot ushered the assembled guests into a semicircle before the timepiece. I positioned myself at Poirot's side, notebook in hand, while Inspector Grant lingered discreetly near the doorway. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, voice calm but authoritative, "we are united by circumstance, this tragic event, by our shared desire for truth. Before we proceed further, we must know one another fully. Each of you stands charged in the court of my little grey cells." Lady Winifred Hargrave curtsied with graceful composure, though the tremor in her gloved hands betrayed her nerves. "I am grateful to assist, monsieur," she said softly. "My late husband, Sir Alaric Hargrave, was a patron of Mr. Finch's craft. I had hoped only for beauty from his workshop, not this." Poirot nodded. "And yet you, madame, had motive to ensure the success of his commissions. A delayed delivery might cost you societal embarrassment. Pray, tell us, was there any quarrel between you and Mr. Finch?" She drew in a breath. "He was meticulous, too much so, at times. He delayed my clock's restoration by days, claiming imperfections in the mechanism. I believed it mere fastidiousness, nothing more." Sir Reginald Peabody stepped forward next, his broad shoulders squared. "I am an investor in Mr. Finch's business venture to produce luxury pocket watches." His plans promised handsome returns, but lately he hesitated. He approached me, asking for additional capital. I refused. Poirot's dark eyes glittered. And you, sir, feared financial loss. Peabody's jaw tensed. A prudent concern. A man cannot throw good money after bad. From the back of the gallery came the soft click of polished boots. Colonel Amelia Walsingham, clad in a tailored tweed suit, advanced. Her keen grey eyes took in each face in turn. I attended the dinner as a friend of Lord Clarendon. Mr. Finch was to install a chronometer for our upcoming archaeological expedition. In Egypt, without his instrument, our timetable collapses. Inspector Grant cleared his throat. Colonel, you were in his company last night. She inclined her head. Indeed, we discussed calibration under desert conditions, he confided. That the alloy for the balance spring took longer to procure than he expected. Poirot steepled his fingers. Noted, Colonel. And you, Lady Winifred, you had your pearls restored by Mr. Finch's workshop, did you not? Pardon. The lady's face paled. The stringing of your heirloom pearls, Poirot explained. That required his delicate touch and secrecy pearls, nest ce pas, unchanged in colour. She glanced down at her pearls in surprise, then settled her shoulders. Yes, and I paid him a generous fee for privacy. A soft cough drew up attention to the far corner where Miss Eleanor Finch stood, slender and shuttered in black mourning. Her pale face was framed by dark curls, and her eyes, ringed by sleepless nights, flickered with restrained emotion. I am Aurelius Finch's daughter, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I arrived this morning at Lord Clarendon's. Invitation to oversee my father's legacy. Poirot offered her a gentle nod. Mademoiselle Finch, forgive my frankness, but your inheritance depends on the completion of his final masterpiece. Her lips trembled. Yes, I hoped to secure. My future yet, I would never harm him. Before any follow-up could be asked, a tall, austere figure stepped forward. Dr. Leonard Bryce, the village physician and long-time friend of the Finch family. His spectacles caught the light as he spoke. I am here to provide medical counsel, not profit. Mr. Finch confided in me last week about bouts of fatigue, though he attributed them to late nights at the bench. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Fatigue, yes, but perhaps something more. Poisoning, perhaps. Dr. Bryce's brow furrowed. I found no evidence of toxins in our tests. His blood work was unremarkable. I see, Poirot murmured. He turned to the group as a whole. Each of you possesses a motive, whether financial, professional, or inherited. Yet one among you wields the means and opportunity. He held up the black glove found in the workshop. Who here owns such a glove? Sir Peabody's hand twitched. He swallowed and ran a tongue across his lips. I may own a pair, he admitted. I use them when inspecting fine machinery. Poirot inclined his head. Indeed, but the torn cuff suggests haste. You came to the workshop unexpectedly, n'est-ce pas? Peabody looked away. I visited to retrieve documents contracts, when I found the door ajar. I did not enter further. Contracts, yes, Poirot said quietly. Contracts that might reveal your financial exposure. He paused, then addressed them all. You will remain here until midnight, when I will examine the gallery clock under the conditions described in this taunting note. He held up the parchment. Until then, I require your full cooperation. Any attempt to evade will be noted. A murmur rippled through the assembled suspects. Lady Hargrave's knuckles whitened around a silk handkerchief. Colonel Walsingham's posture stiffened. Miss Finch pressed her gloved fingers to her lips. Dr. Bryce adjusted his coat. Sir Peabody simply stared at the floor. Now, Poirot continued, I shall retire briefly to organize my thoughts. Grant, you will keep the doors watched. Hastings, join me for a moment in the study. As Inspector Grant moved to his task and I trailed after Poirot, the tension in the gallery was palpably an electric current of suspicion and dread. Behind us, the suspects exchanged guarded glances, each calculating their next move. Once in the study, Poirot leaned against a polished mahogany desk. Hastings observed the psychological dynamics, Lady Hargrave's social standing, Sir Peabody's financial entanglements, Colonel Walsingham's professional reliance, Miss Finch's inheritance, and Dr. Bryce's intimacy with the family. Each is a piece of the puzzle. He tapped the note in his coat pocket. At midnight, beneath the face of this grand clock, truth will emerge. I have arranged my deductions correctly. I nodded, heart pounding. And until then, we watch and we wait. He smiled thinly. Patience, Hastings. The little grey cells require time to decipher the secrets of human nature. Silently, we left the study, our footsteps echoing in the corridor. Behind us, in the gallery, a circle of suspects waited unaware that the hands of fate were already turning toward the hour of revelation. Chapter 4. Poirot arrives. The heavy velvet drapes of the salon were drawn back just as the silver light of late afternoon filtered through the tall windows, casting elongated shadows across the polished parquet floor. It was at precisely this moment that Hercule Poirot made his most deliberate entrance, his gait measured and poised. He paused at the threshold, straightening his impeccably tailored frock coat, then stepped forward with the air of a stage actor taking command of the scene. Mise Amos, he pronounced, voice rich with theatrical clarity. I have arrived. His dark eyes swept over the assembled suspects. Lady Winifred Hargrave, still gloved and pale. Sir Reginald Peabody, posture rigid in his tailored suit. Colonel Amelia Walsingham, eyes cool and observant. Miss Eleanor Finch, whose mourning black seemed almost too heavy for her slender frame, and Dr. Leonard Bryce, spectacles perched at the tip of his nose, ever the professional. Even Inspector Grant straightened, hat in hand, as if acknowledging the gravity of Poirot's presence. He approached the walnut clock first, the simple timepiece with the cracked porcelain face that had been overlooked by all but Hastings. Poirot's gloved fingertips hovered an inch above its surface before he withdrew his hand and tapped the glass lightly with the tip of his cane. Notice, Hastings, he said to me, how the culprit chose this clock for their taunt. It is the plainest, least ostentatious Pisa symbol of hidden simplicity, and yet its cracked face bears witness to a fracture beneath the surface. He stepped back, pivoting gracefully to face the room. Poirot's entrance was not merely physical, it was a shift in atmosphere. Conversations hushed, and the ticking of the great gallery clock sounded oddly amplified, a rhythmic heartbeat in the charged air. He folded his hands behind his back and regarded each suspect with equal parts curiosity and compassion, as though he were both friend and judge. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, you have met me in the midst of chaos. A man lies dead in the workshop, a torn glove marks a trail, and a cryptic note promises further intrigue at midnight. But we must not be governed solely by circumstance. Let us begin with your impressions of the scene. Lady Hargrave spoke first, her voice wavering. I found the workshop door open and the body. I ran at once for help. Her pearls clinked softly as she placed a hand on the walnut clock's case for support. I was horrified, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot inclined his head. Horrified. Indeed, yet you approached calmly. Observed the absence of panic in your hands. A woman of society remains composed even under duress. He turned to Sir Peabody. And you, Sir Reginald, you followed me directly. Why did you not rush to assist the authorities? Sir Peabody cleared his throat. I wished first to speak with you, monsieur. You are, after all, the expert. His lips twitched in an awkward attempt at humour. Ah, Poirot said softly, but expertise does not absolve one from action. A client of Mr. Finch's would, I think, ensure his safety. Peabody's mouth snapped shut, and he offered no further explanation. Turning his attention to Colonel Walsingham, Poirot's gaze sharpened. Colonel, you mentioned earlier that Mr. Finch was to prepare a chronometer for your expedition, yet you arrived well after dinner. She met his eyes without flinching. I finished my liaison with Lord Clarendon regarding expedition logistics. I had no cause to visit the workshop that night. Perhaps not, Poirot replied, but the absence of motive is, in itself, a motive. One who needs nothing. To hide leaves no footprint, yet a footprint remains. He tapped his cane on the floor, 2 sharp clicks that cut through the tension dot. Miss Finch, shoulders quivering, cleared her throat. I spent most of the evening in prayer in the chapel. I did not see my father after dinner. She swallowed hard, and Poirot nodded with sympathy. Mademoiselle, grief often demands solitude. Yet you returned to this house at Dononant. Why? Her eyes brimmed. I could not bear the thought of returning to an empty home. I came to see his workshop, to feel his presence. Poirot allowed a fraction of a smile, an understandable deception. And yet, your tearful facade might disguise intent. Doctor, Bryce expostulated, you cannot suspect me of murder, Poirot. My relationship with the Finch family is as physician only. But a physician knows poisons as well as cures, Poirot countered gently. You assured me the blood work was clean, yet a clever toxin might evade routine analysis. Dr. Bryce's composure cracked for an instant before he drew himself straight. Poirot took a step back and raised, his hands in a conciliatory gesture. I mean no disrespect. My method is not to cast aspersions, but to illuminate truth. He moved to the center of the circle, cane tapping the floor in time with his words. Now, let us consider the official theory that Mr. Finch's death was a tragic accident, the result of his own carelessness with volatile alloys. A murmur rippled through the group. Peabody shook his head. Impossible. Aurelius Finch was the most careful artisan I ever knew. Lady Hargrave's eyes widened. No man would so neglect his craft. Inspector Grant cleared his throat. I intended to file the scene as accidental. The chemical residue could be from an explosion. Poirot twirled his waxed moustaches. And yet, the charred filings on the floor form a pattern inconsistent with an internal fire. They radiate from a single point near the diagram board, suggesting deliberate placement. He tapped the diagram board as he spoke. The culprit brought these filings to the scene, to imply carelessness where there was none. He paced slowly, hands behind his back. Furthermore, the torn glove suggests a struggle or haste, but the glove was deliberately dusted with specialized filings to mislead. He paused before the great clock's dial. Finally, this grand astronomical clock stands silent tonight, while the simple walnut clock hides the answer. The official theory fails to explain why the simplest timepiece was chosen for misdirection. Silence fell as each suspect digested his words. Poirot pulled a small notebook from his coat pocket and made a few precise entries. Then he addressed Inspector Grant. "Grant, arrange for all servants and guests to remain in the house. No one leaves or enters without my permission." Grant bowed and turned to obey. Poirot then faced the group once more. "Mies, Amos, you have heard my observations. The official theory is untenable. We proceed under a new hypothesis: murder committed with intent to deceive." His voice was quiet, yet carried an undeniable authority. He fixed each suspect with a final, scrutinizing look. "Continue your business, but know that I observe you all. At midnight, we shall gather again. Until then, think on the fracture beneath the surface, the cracked face of the walnut clock. It is there that the truth waits." As he concluded, Poirot swept his gaze over the salon, gathering each person's reaction: a twitch of the eyelash, a tightening of the jaw, a subtle quiver of the lip. With a nod, he turned and, accompanied by Hastings, strode down the corridor toward the study, leaving behind a room charged with silent accusation and mounting suspense. Chapter 5. Initial. Interviews begin. The drawing room, once a scene of hushed accusation, had been transformed into a makeshift interview salon. A small writing desk with blotter and inkwell stood beneath a tall window, and individual chairs were spaced evenly in a semicircle. Monsieur Poirot moved among them with deliberate grace, inspecting each seat before beckoning a suspect to sit. I, Captain Hastings, lingered at his side, ready to record our findings and offer any assistance. "Madame et messieurs," Poirot announced, "we proceed now with the first stage of inquiry, personal interviews. I shall speak with each of you individually in the order you stand before me. Please answer truthfully, for every hesitation or detail may prove significant." He turned to Lady Winifred Hargrave first. "Madame, if you will." She rose with an elegant nod and settled into the chair nearest the window. The afternoon sun cast a soft glow upon her features, yet her expression remained taut. Poirot seated himself directly opposite, placing his notebook on his knee. I took a seat behind him, pen poised. Madame Poirot began. "Last night, you received Mr. Finch's delayed clock from this very room. Describe your conversation with him." Lady Hargrave inhaled, smoothing her skirt. He apologized profusely for the delay, explaining that a rare alloy in the mainspring required additional testing. He seemed agitated, yet he assured me my commission would be his next priority. Agitated, Poirot repeated with interest. "Did he mention the nature of this alloy?" She shook her head. "Only that it was unfamiliar, possibly experimental." He would not elaborate further. "Did you observe any abnormal behavior, tremor of the hand, pallor, or distraction?" Poirot's gaze was gentle but penetrating. Lady Hargrave's lips pressed together. He rubbed his wrist often, as though in discomfort. He also muttered to himself about time slipping away. "Time slipping away," Poirot mused. He jotted down a note. "And afterward, did you see him again?" She paused, as though weighing every memory. "No, I retired early. I did not wish to disturb his work further." Poirot nodded, rising. "Thank you, madame." He offered her a courtesy bow, and she withdrew to join the small cluster of onlookers. "Sir." Reginald Peabody was next. He approached with measured steps, though his face betrayed a flicker of anxiety. Poirot patted the empty chair beside mine. "Sir Reginald," he said, "you provided additional funding to Mr. Finch last week, yes?" Peabody seated himself, clearing his throat. "I lent him a rather substantial sum for the procurement of materials. A loan," Poirot repeated. "Were any conditions attached?" "Only that repayment occur upon completion of my own pocket watch designer, one-of-a-kind heirloom." Peabody's voice cracked slightly. "A gentleman's agreement. And when did you last see Mr. Finch?" He exhaled slowly. "Tuesday evening, at my home. He delivered preliminary sketches of my design." "Preliminary sketches," Poirot repeated thoughtfully. "Did he appear concerned about payment?" Peabody frowned. He acknowledged my generosity but hinted at additional costs. He requested a further advance, which I denied. "And how did he react to denial?" Poirot asked, steepling his fingers. He pleaded, but I remained firm. I could not risk further losses. Poirot leaned forward, gazed steady. "After your refusal, did you observe any change in his demeanor?" Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. He seemed despondent. He spoke of ruined reputations, livelihoods lost. "Ruined reputations," Poirot echoed. He rose, closing his notebook. "Mercy, Sir Reginald." The knight of industry withdrew, leaving behind a faint scent of sherry. Poirot motioned to Colonel Walsingham, who stepped forward with quiet confidence, seating herself with military precision. "Colonel," he began, "you and Mr. Finch planned an instrumental calibration for your expedition. Describe the technical challenge." She inclined her chin. "The balance spring required an alloy that would withstand extreme temperature fluctuations. Mr. Finch told me he had located a source of such an alloy, but acquisition was delayed by customs." "Customs delays," Poirot repeated. "You provided assistance." "Only a letter of introduction," she replied. "I could not expedite that process personally." "Did Mr. Finch express frustration over the delay?" Poirot's tone was gentle. She nodded. He feared the expedition. Timetable would suffer. He spoke of being answerable to various stakeholders. "Stakeholders," Poirot murmured. "And what of personal stakes?" "Did he confide any distress beyond professional concerns?" Colonel Walsingham's gaze held firmness. "Only that he felt the weight of his reputation." Poirot smiled thinly. "Reputation, yes, sir. Delicate mechanism, indeed." He jotted in his notebook, then stood. "Thank you, Colonel." One by one, Poirot conducted similar interviews with Miss Finch and Dr. Bryce. Miss Finch wept quietly as she described her father's meticulous nature and their strained financial situation. She admitted to lingering near his workshop at dawn, hoping to ensure his safety, and confessed to finding the torn glove on her father's work table, though she claimed she did not touch it. Dr. Bryce, pale and methodical, recounted his medical consultations with the clockmaker. He insisted there was no sign of toxin and produced his notes to prove it. Yet Poirot noted a slight tremor in the doctor's hand as he passed over a ledger recording a substantial payment from Mr. Finch's account, funds unrelated to medical fees. After the final interview, Poirot closed his notebook with a decisive SNAP. He stood, glancing around the room as the suspects regrouped. "Ms. Amos," he declared, "your candor has provided layers of insight. Yet a single inconsistency remains: the origin of the alloy. Only one of you possessed knowledge of this experimental metal before Mr. Finch mentioned it." He fixed each with a deliberate look. "One of you also had opportunity to deposit the alloy filings and the glove in the workshop, before or after the crime, to frame another. A palpable tension rippled through the group. Lady Hargrave pressed her gloved fingers together. Sir Reginald's brow furrowed. Colonel Walsingham pursed her lips. Miss Finch dabbed her eyes. Dr. Bryce shifted uncomfortably. Poirot turned to Inspector Grant. "Grant, secure the workshop again and obtain samples of that rare alloy. We must compare its composition to these filings." Grant bowed and hurried. Out. Poirot faced us Hastings and the guests alike. "Until midnight," he concluded, "I shall refine my deductions. When we assemble at the gallery, truth will be drawn as surely as hands upon a clock face." He glanced at me. "Come, Hastings, the little grey cells require reflection." As we departed the room, I observed the suspects through half-closed doors, each caught between fear and defiance. In their faces, I saw the myriad motives that Poirot's method would soon sift into proof or exoneration. The game deepened. I, as ever, stood in eager anticipation of the next move. Chapter 6. The first false lead. The gallery lay in hushed expectation when midnight struck. The great astronomical clock's chimes cascading through the vaulted ceiling in 12 resonant tones. A solitary candle at each end of the room cast trembling shadows over the assembled suspects. Monsieur Poirot stood before the walnut clock, now bathed in moonlight through the stained glass window. I, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Grant flanked him, ready to witness the next stage of his deductions. Poirot raised a finger. "Mise, Amos. The hour has come to test our first hypothesis." He nodded to Grant, who signalled 2 constables at the door. The officers stepped forward and, with respectful politeness, retrieved a small glass vial from Poirot's coat one, containing the charcoal grey filings collected at the workshop, and produced a larger container, holding samples of the rare alloy Colonel Walsingham had described. "Observe," Poirot instructed, removing the stopper from the alloy sample. "This is purported to be the experimental, metal exotic, rare." He tipped a few fragments onto a porcelain dish. Under ultraviolet light, it should glow with an unmistakable hue. He lifted a spirit lamp and shone its blue flame through a prism, casting a thin beam across the filings in the dish. The sample alloy shimmered with a soft emerald gleam. "Alloy confirmed," Poirot announced. He set aside the lamp and picked up the vial. "Now, these filings, dusted about the workshop. If they derive from the same alloy, then the culprit must have access to this material." He poured the vial's contents into a second dish and repeated the illumination. The filings glowed dimly, but with a pallid green, distinct from the alloy's vibrant brilliance. Poirot tapped the edge of the filing dish. "Notice the disparity. These filings are not of the rare alloy, but of a common compound fare in industrial machinery." He looked toward Sir Reginald Peabody. "Monsieur Peabody, you admitted to inspecting heavy machinery in your own factory. Does ferronickel feature in your operations?" Peabody stiffened, voice tight. "Yes, we use ferronickel in certain bearings. But I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, I would never wield my factory's materials to commit murder." Poirot nodded. "Indeed, but one cannot ignore this link." He turned and lifted the black glove found in the workshop. "Furthermore, this glove bears traces of ferronickel filings on its cuff and fingertips." He tilted the glove under the lamp. The filings shimmered like stardust against the dark leather. A collective gasp passed through the group. Sir Reginald drew back, expression stricken. "This is preposterous. I did not kill Mr. Finch." Poirot's gaze remained steady, yet the evidence suggests otherwise. A torn glove, dusted with ferronickel, placed deliberately at the seemed to implicate someone familiar with such filings. He stepped closer to Peabody. You visited the workshop unexpectedly to retrieve documents. Yes. Had you handled your glove while searching? Peabody swallowed hard. I found the glove on the bench. I touched it, yes, but I did not clean it. I intended to return it to its owner. Inspector Grant cleared his throat. Sir Reginald, that glove was discovered beneath the diagram board, among the filings. You had motor financial loss and means the Ferronickel and opportunity access to the workshop. I must place you under arrest. Peabody's face turned ashen. What? You can't. You have no proof beyond these coincidences. Grant produced a pair of handcuffs. I am sorry, sir, but I have my orders. Lady Hargrave clutched her hands to her chest. This is a travesty. Colonel Walsingham's eyes narrowed. Miss Finch gasped, and Dr. Bryce looked away, brow furrowed. Poirot raised a hand. Hold, Grant. His voice, though firm, contained an unmistakable undercurrent of caution. Arrest him, by all means, if only to test the theory. But remember, the first hypothesis is rarely the last truth. Grant nodded reluctantly, and the constables moved to secure Peabody. As the cuffs clicked shut, Sir Reginald's protests echoed through the gallery. I did not kill him. You will see that I am innocent. Poirot beckoned me forward. Hastings, come. We stepped into a narrow alcove by a side window. Through the stained glass, the moonlight painted coloured patterns on the floorheads, blues and golds swirling amid the gloom. Observe, Hastings, Poirot whispered. We have a suspect in custody who appears guilty. All evidence alike means opportunity, and even the physical glove. Yet something still troubles me. I frowned. The filings were common, not the rare alloy, but everything else fits. Precisely. Poirot tapped his temple. The villain wished us to think of exotic metals, but instead they chose a mundane compound. A misdirection ferronickel is too obvious for Sir Reginald, known for heavy industry. I considered this, but who else could use ferronickel? Poirot's eyes glittered. Someone with knowledge of machinery, perhaps the estate's engineer, whom we have not questioned, or a servant familiar with the workshops. Cleaning protocols. I shivered. We overlooked the staff entirely. An oversight, Poirot admitted, but one we shall correct. He pressed his hand to his chin. For now, let Sir Reginald remain detained. The appearance of his guilt will unsettle the true culprit, who may now reveal themselves. He paused, listening to Peabody's muffled protests behind the heavy door. A soft creak drew our attention to the walnut clock. Under the moon's glow, its cracked face stood out starkly. Poirot regarded it with a thoughtful expression. Do you recall, Hastings, how the culprit chose this unassuming clock for their note? Seek the gloved hand in the gallery at midnight. He tapped the phrase in the air. It was a taunt, yes, but also a clue. The torn glove was a red herring pointing away from the true mechanism. He turned to me. We must interview the household staff and examine the estate's service corridors. The culprit may slip up when faced with the certainty of Sir Reginald's arrest. I nodded. Shall I speak with butler and the housekeeper? Excellent idea, Poirot said, and summon Grant to order the staff sealed in the servants' quarters. No one must leave. He straightened, adjusting his cufflinks, and gave a final glance toward the detained Sir Reginald. Mies Amos, he called to the remaining suspects. Tonight's developments are but the first act in our drama. The first false lead is set. Now we press onward to unveil the authentic truth. With that, Poirot strode from the gallery, leaving behind a stunned grouping and the echo of his parting words. The chimes of the great clock faded into silence, but their portent lingered in the tangled web of deception. The first apparent solution was often the most deceptive. Chapter 7. The psychological game. The hush of dawn still clung to Clarendon House when Monsieur Poirot and I descended the narrow servants' staircase toward the quarters below. The corridors were deserted, save for the muted footfalls of 2 constables stationed at each door. Their grim faces spoke of long hours and frayed nerves. With Sir Reginald Peabody's arrest fresh in everyone's mind, tension pulsed through the estate like an unseen current. "I shall speak with the staff, Hastings," Poirot murmured, voice low yet carrying an undeniable authority. "Their loyalty is to the household, and they may yield truths overlooked by those in high society." He paused at the entrance to the servants' common room, where a handful of housemaids, footmen, and the under-butler, Mr. Fletcher, sat huddled. "Good morning, Mies, Amos," Poirot began brightly. "I require your assistance." The staff exchanged uneasy glances. Fletcher, a stout man with wary eyes, stepped forward. "Monsieur Poirot, we were told to stay here until further notice." "Precisely," Poirot replied. "You will remain here still, but I ask you to share what you know of yesterday's events." He surveyed the room. "Who last cleaned the workshop?" he inquired. A young housemaid, Alice Trent, raised her hand. "I did, sir, early yesterday afternoon. I dusted the shelves and swept the floor. And did you notice anything odd?" Poirot prompted gently. Alice hesitated, then nodded. "I found a single black glove by the diagram board. I thought it belonged to one of the gentlemen, so I left it there." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A wise decision, mademoiselle. And after that, I finished my duties and reported to Mrs. Danvers, the housekeeper, who told me not to touch. Anything else?" She swallowed. "I did see Mr. Finch's apprentice, Mr. Bartholomew, near the workshop door, looking distraught." "Bartholomew," Poirot repeated. "Where might I find him?" "He's in the tool room, sir," Alice replied. Poirot nodded to Inspectors Grant and the constables. "Inform Mr. Bartholomew that I wish to speak with him." As they departed, Poirot motioned me closer. "You see, Hastings, the black glove was moved or deliberately left to mislead. The apprentice might know more of the workshop's comings and goings. We followed the footman's instructions down a narrow corridor lined with tool racks and benches. There, with grease-stained overalls and dirt-smudged hands, stood Mr. Bartholomew, slender and anxious. "Monsieur Poirot," he greeted, voice trembling. "I did as you asked." Poirot studied him intently. "Bartholomew, tell me of your father's tools. Do you use ferronickel in restoration?" The apprentice blinked. "No, sir, we use standard brass and steel. Ferronickel is for heavy machinery." He shifted uneasily. I have a friend at the mill, though. He once gave me filings to experiment with." "Indeed," Poirot murmured. "And did you ever handle such filings here?" Bartholomew's Adam's apple bobbed. "Once. I found some on the workshop floor and swept them aside. I meant to discard them, but then the inspector arrived." Poirot nodded. "Thank you. That explains the presence of ferroniclint, deuced by you, unknowing of its significance." He turned to me. "The apprentice is innocent, but his actions allowed coincidence to masquerade as proof." We returned upstairs just as the suspects were reconvening in the morning light. Poirot motioned to the drawing room, now stripped of pretense and perfumed with fresh tea. He gestured for Colonel Walsingham to sit beside him, then invited Lady Hargrave and Miss Finch to the opposite sofa. Dr. Bryce remained by the fireplace, spectacles perched precariously, and Sir Reginald Peabody sat as far from us as the room. Aloud, silent and brooding. "Mes amis," Poirot began, voice calm. "We have learned that one false lead has misdirected us. Let us now engage in a psychological game to observe true reactions." He tapped the arm of Lady Hargrave's chair. "Madame, you mentioned your commission was delayed due to an experimental alloy, yet we now know it was a misunderstanding." Lady Hargrave's lips tightened. I was misinformed." Poirot inclined his head. "Understandable, but consider. This, the glove placed in the workshop. Did you ever see that glove before?" She glanced at Miss Finch. "I know very well." Poirot turned to Colonel Walsingham. "Colonel, you claimed unfamiliarity with ferronickel despite its utility in heavy machinery, yet you serve in an armoured division where such metals are common." The Colonel's composure faltered. She exhaled. "My division uses hardened steel, not ferronickel, but some specialized components do," Poirot pressed. "Would you have access to supplement your needs?" She bristled. "You imply I murdered my friend." Preposterous. Poirot's serene smile remained, merely exploring possibilities. He pivoted to Dr. Bryce. "Doctor, your blood work for Mr. Finch showed no toxins, yet a rare poison can mimic natural causes." Dr. Bryce's eyes flickered. With alarm, "I would have detected arsenic, strychnine, surely not an undetectable compound." "Some botanical poisons degrade swiftly," Poirot suggested. "You would know that better than I." The doctor's jaw clenched. He swallowed. "I would never harm him." "Of course." Dr. Poirot's tone was gentle, but insistently probing. He turned finally to Miss Finch. "And you, Mademoiselle, did you truly discover your father's body at dawn, or did you enter earlier, hoping to find him alive?" His dark eyes searched hers. Miss Finch's face blanched. I wanted to forgive him for our argument over finances." She lowered her gaze. "I didn't touch anything, I swear." Poirot's gaze flicked to Lady Hargrave. "You were overheard quarrelling with Mr. Finch last week about payment schedules." Lady Hargrave gasped and clasped her hands. That was business, nothing more. Poirot allowed a moment's silence to settle before speaking again. "Observe how each of you reacts when your statements are juxtaposed with new information. Some grow defensive, others reveal unintended truths." He turned to me. "Hastings, note these subtleties. Lady Hargrave's fear of scandal, Walsingham's pride in her reputation, Bryce's professional anxiety, and Miss Finch's filial guilt. These are the threads we must weave." He faced the group. "Now, let me propose a scenario. The murderer sought to blend exotic misdirection with a mundane clue. The torn glove, the filings, the midnight note, all intended to distract from a more personal motive." He stepped closer to Lady Hargrave. "Your venture into anonymity with those pearls cost you more than reputation. Did you not fear exposure of a deeper secret?" The lady's eyes brimmed with tears. "I know." Poirot nodded sympathetically. "Secrets have a way of surfacing. Mes amis." He pivoted to Colonel Walsingham. "Your heart beats for precision, but does it beat for revenge? Was there more than professional pressure on Mr. Finch?" The Colonel's face tightened. "You insult me, monsieur." Poirot's smile remained unwavering. "Forgive me, though your blush speaks volumes." He turned to Dr. Bryce. "And you, doctor, did you ever prescribe a remedy that served your own interests as much as the patient's. The doctor's hand trembled. No, never. Well, Poirot said softly, we shall see. He raised a hand. Let us pause here. Your reactions have been enlightening. I ask you to retire for the afternoon, reflect on your positions, and join me again at 8 o'clock. Until then, remember that in this psychological game, the tension itself can fracture a Facade. As the suspects dispersed, shoulders burdened with unease, Poirot placed a gentle hand on my arm. Hastings, observe how guilt and innocence manifest in behavior, not just words. The next interviews will be most revealing. Together, we left the drawing room, the echoes of orchestrated provocation lingering like a barely audible clock tick. Each suspect unwittingly moved toward their own undoing. Chapter 8. A secondary mystery. The evening air hung heavy with anticipation. As Clarendon House's grand dining room filled with the muted clink of porcelain and silver, moonlight filtered through stained glass panels, casting fractured patterns on the damask tablecloth. The suspect's lady, Winifred Hargrave, Colonel Amelia Walsingham, Miss Eleanor Finch, and Dr. Leonard Bryce sat at the long table, each under the watchful gaze of Inspector Grant and 2 constables. Sir Reginald Peabody remained in the gallery's study, his arrest still awaiting formal confirmation. Monsieur Poirot entered quietly, his presence commanding immediate attention. He moved to the head of the table beside Hastings, where untouched plates of chicken volumovant waited beneath silver lids. Mears Amos, he intoned, we embark upon Act 2 of our inquiry, an unexpected twist in our mystery. He lifted a slender finger toward the far corner of the room, where a sideboard held a silver champagne bucket and crystal flutes. Just then, the butler, Mr. Fletcher, appeared at the doorway, his face ashen. He approached with measured steps, carrying a small, sealed envelope addressed to Monsieur Poirot in spidery handwriting. Sir, Fletcher announced, voice trembling slightly, this arrived a few minutes ago. It was found in the library, tucked between the pages of Lord Clarendon's guest register. Poirot took the envelope with a nod, his moustaches twitching in anticipation. With deliberate care, he slipped the seal and unfolded the parchment within. The room fell silent as he read aloud. When one clock falls silent, another begins its revenge. The heirloom pearls shall pay the price. Midnight in the salon. A collective breath echoed through the guests. Lady Hargrave clutched her pearls, eyes wide with alarm. Colonel Walsingham's posture stiffened. Miss Finch gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. Dr. Bryce's face paled. Poirot refolded the note and tucked it into his waistcoat pocket. A secondary mystery, he declared. Someone now threatens Lady Hargrave's inheritance, her pearls to draw our attention from the primary crime. We must act swiftly. He turned to Grant. Inspector, secure the salon and have the pearls retrieved and placed under guard. Notify the household staff and search for any signs of tampering. Grant bowed and departed to carry out the orders. Poirot faced the 4 suspects. Madame Hargrave, your pearls are once more at risk. Tell me, has anyone shown undue interest in them since this evening? Lady Hargrave dabbed at her eyes. No one except myself. I brought them for comfort. She looked to Miss Finch. Eleanor, did you see anything amiss? Miss Finch shook her head. I was in the library when the note arrived. I returned here to find it already on the table. Her voice wavered. I heard a faint creak in the hallway, but assumed it was a servant. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Colonel Walsingham, your expedition demands punctuality. Could a threat against the pearls serve as a diversion for you? I assure you, monsieur, the colonel replied crisply, I have no quarrel with Lady Hargrave beyond professional courtesy. Dr. Bryce cleared his throat. I was in the solarium, reviewing my notes for Mr. Finch's autopsy. I saw no one approach the salon. Poirot's gaze flicked between them, and yet someone did secretly and with intention. Note that the threat mentions revenge, suggesting a personal vendetta against you, Lady Hargrave. He turned to Hastings. Hastings, we must examine the salon immediately. Together, Poirot and I led a small team Inspector Grant, a constable, and Mr. Fletcher down the dimly lit corridor to the salon. Grant held a lantern aloft, its golden beam revealing ornate wallpaper and plush carpets. Poirot examined the table where the note had lain. The silver tray that had held the pearls was now empty, its mirror-like surface reflecting our lantern's glow. They removed the pearls without disturbing the tray's position. Poirot observed, running a gloved finger along the edge. Someone with practiced care. He knelt to inspect the carpet. Observe these faint indentations, footsteps angled toward the library, then back toward the gallery. He tapped the floor with his cane, tracing the path. The intruder moved swiftly, cloak obscuring their form. Grant shone the lantern on a small, dark smudge near the skirting board. A fingerprint, sir. He knelt, carefully lifting a glass vial to collect it. Poirot studied the mark. A partial print too smudged for immediate identification, but enough to confirm human touch. He rose and scanned the room. No forced entry. The salon door was unlocked, likely by someone with access. He fixed his gaze on Miss Finch. Your arrival this evening was unannounced, was it not? Miss Finch swallowed. I joined the group only after finding my way from the library. Yet you entered the salon before the others, Poirot pressed. Gently, could you have placed the note and retrieved the pearls within that interval? She shook her head vehemently. No, I would never steal from my friend. Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke. Very well, Poirot's tone softened. He turned to Colonel Walsingham. You, who move with military precision, could you have navigated unseen? The colonel's cheeks flushed. The solarium door is on the opposite side of the house. It is unlikely I could reach here and back unnoticed. Poirot nodded and then looked to Dr. Bryce. Doctor, your rounds kept you close to Lord Clarendon's chambers. Could you have slipped through? Dr. Bryce adjusted his spectacles. My routine follows strict timing, rarely deviating. I would not risk breaking it. Poirot folded his arms. Each has an alibi, yet the evidence, footsteps, fingerprint, and the intruder's knowledge of the salon's layout points to someone intimately familiar with the house. He gestured to the faint footprint impressions. Note the direction, toward the gallery where Sir Reginald remains detained. He tapped the fingerprint vial. This new crime serves not merely to threaten Lady Hargrave, but to draw attention, perhaps to free an imprisoned accomplice. We exchanged a glance. You suggest someone intends to spring Sir Reginald? I asked softly. Or someone wishes to harm him further, Poirot replied. Either way, our primary focus must expand. We face not one, but two mysteries, murder and extortion. The threads may intertwine. He pocketed his cane and turned to the empty tray. Inspect the library, Hastings. Perhaps the registration book bears clues. I nodded and hurried along the corridor to the library, where the guest register lay open on a mahogany desk. Candlelight flickered over written names, but one entry stood apart. C.F. Clarendon House, 11:45 p.m. The initials matched Colonel Walsingham. yet beneath them a second, hastier scrawl read WW 11:50 p.m. "Here," I called, tapping Poirot's shoulder as he entered. "Another signature WW at 11:50. He leaned over the desk. WW, yes, likely. Winifred W. The timing coincides with the intruder's estimated passage. He studied the ink. Look at the pressure, heavy at first, then lighter, a tremor in the hand." Lady Hargrave's voice drifted from the doorway, anxious. "Is that mine?" Poirot rose and offered her a reassuring nod. "Only your signature, madame, and possibly the culprit's imitation." He looked again at the sheet. "This scribbled note beneath your name was that someone trying to warn you or to incriminate you." She glanced at the inscription, brow furrowed. "I don't know." Poirot turned to the group. "Mies, Amos, the secondary mystery has given us new suspects, those who would benefit from your fear, madame, and from confusion between signatures." He stepped to the doorway. "Tonight, the house is sealed. Tomorrow, we shall test these leaden signatures and the smudged fingerprint. Until then, remember, two crimes do not necessarily point to two culprits." Back in the dining room, Lady Hargrave pressed her pearls to her chest. Colonel Walsingham studied the registration book with narrowed eyes. Miss Finch trembled, gazing. At the carpet, Dr. Bryce adjusted his coat, lips pressed thinly. Poirot captured each expression with a subtle nod. Little grey cells working as the candlelight flickered. The secondary mystery, he knew, would crack open hidden secrets and, by dawn, the true face of the perpetrator would emerge from the shadows. Chapter 9. Hidden Connections. The hushed corridors of Clarendon House seemed to pulse with unspoken alliances. As dawn's first pale light crept through narrow windows, in the great hall the astronomical clock stood sentinel, its brass arms frozen at the moment of midnight's revelations. Monsieur Poirot paced before it, fingers steepled behind his back, surveying the assembled group. Lady Winifred Hargrave, Colonel Amelia Walsingham, Miss Eleanor Finch, and Dr. Leonard Bryce, each flanked by an officer. I stood at Poirot's side, taking careful notes of their expressions. "Mies, Amos," Poirot began, voice measured. "We now seek the hidden connections that bind these events. To crimes, yes, but more crucially, to motives entwined among yourselves." He turned first to Colonel Walsingham. "Colonel, earlier you described your expedition's need for a chronometer. Yet your proposal to Lord Clarendon was rebuffed, was it not?" The Colonel's eyes flickered. "Lord Clarendon preferred another sponsor, Sir Reginald's consortium. My offer to underwrite the costs was declined on his counsel." Poirot nodded. "Indeed. And Lady Hargrave, your pearls were restored by Mr. Finch at Colonel Walsingham's request, was it not?" Lady Hargrave's breath caught. "I merely lent him my resources. He had connections to my husband through charity circles." "Charity circles," Poirot echoed. "Yet those circles often conceal strategic partnerships." He turned to Miss Finch. "Eleanor, you inherited debts from your father, which Sir Reginald's loan partially covered, but the remainder was assumed by Dr. Bryce's medical fee waivers." "Yes." Miss Finch's face paled. "Dr. Bryce offered to defer costs until I secured my inheritance." Dr. Bryce inclined his head. "A gesture of goodwill, certainly, but also of interest. My family's endowment depended on the Finch legacy remaining solvent. It seems," Poirot mused aloud, "that each of you is financially interwoven." He clicked his cane against the parquet. Sir Reginald's investment, Colonel Walsingham's sponsorship, Lady Hargrave's patronage. Dr. Bryce's deferred payment saw, converged upon Mr. Finch's workshop. He paused before Lady Hargrave. "Madame, how did you feel when Mr. Finch hinted at insolvency?" Lady Hargrave pressed her gloved hands together. "I was concerned for his reputation, yes, but also for my own standing. A scandal would reflect on all who engaged his services. And you, Colonel," Poirot continued, "did you fear? Delay to your expedition would expose you to professional ridicule." She met his gaze coolly. "A failed expedition tarnishes one's career. I could ill afford that." He directed his attention to Dr. Bryce. "Doctor, your practice thrived on the Finch family's patronage. Were you not concerned when debts mounted?" Dr. Bryce adjusted his spectacles. "Clients desert a physician whose patron cannot pay. My livelihood depended, at least in part, on his solvency." Poirot's eyes darted to Miss Finch last. "And you, Eleanor, what would you have done if your father's debts proved insurmountable?" She inhaled shakily. I would have sold the house. I might have had to leave England." His gaze softened for a fraction of a heartbeat. Such stakes create desperation. He pivoted back to the center of the room. "Now, consider personal alliances beyond finances." He gestured to Lady Hargrave and Colonel Walsingham. "You two met at a society luncheon hosted by the Finch family last spring. You shared confidences about your respective ambitions." Lady Hargrave's forehead creased. "We discussed philanthropic initiatives, nothing more." Poirot tapped his cane. "Yet you exchanged private letters afterwards." Speaking of mutual advantages, he produced 2 envelopes from his coat, each sealed and addressed in a matching hand. "Found in Lady Hargrave's dressing room this morning," she gasped. "Those are personal correspondences." He broke one open and read a single line. "Together, our efforts ensure his gratitude and our elevation." He handed the letter to Colonel Walsingham. "Recognize this style." The Colonel's jaw clenched. "I did not know you had these, monsieur." "Because you assumed discretion," Poirot replied. "But your alliance went further. You planned to co-host an exhibition of Mr. Finch's work, dedicating proceeds to both your causes." Miss Finch's brow furrowed. "But those proceeds were meant for my inheritance." Dr. Bryce raised a gloved hand. "And yet, if the exhibition failed, you would fall back on my deferred fees." "You see," Poirot said, addressing us all, "the financial web was meant to rescue Mr. Finch, but instead ensnared you all when he threatened insolvency. Your alliances faltered." He pointed to Lady Hargrave. "Madame, when the pearl note threatened you, it was not solely revenge, it was a signal to your partner. Time to act." Lady Hargrave's voice trembled. "But I never intended harm." "Intent," Poirot mused, "and action are distinct. A signal can activate desperation." He turned to Colonel Walsingham. "Your note in the library aimed not only to mislead, but to force Sir Reginald's release. You needed a scapegoat to clear the financial entanglements." The Colonel stood rigid. "I did not plan murder." "Perhaps not," Poirot conceded, "but the secondary note, revenge, suggests one among you sought to shift blame." He walked slowly, cane tapping. "Now reflect on your hidden connections. Lady Hargrave and Colonel Walsingham's alliance. Colonel Walsingham and Sir Reginald's rivalry for sponsorship. Lady Hargrave's reliance on Dr. Bryce's goodwill. Miss Finch's vulnerability to both." He paused beside Miss Finch. "Eleanor, your grief, was it genuine, or a guise to mask cooperation?" Miss Finch's eyes glistened. "I loved my father. I would never collude." Poirot nodded. "Yet, You withheld your knowledge of the alliance until now. He turned to Dr. Bryce. Doctor, your role provided medical pretext and access to poisons. Dr. Bryce stiffened. I told you, no toxins were found. True, Poirot conceded. But a fast-acting botanical compound could escape routine tests. He scanned the group. Ms. Amos, you were bound by gratitude and desperation. But only one among you had motive clear enough to kill and misdirect with such precision. He tapped the walnut clock's cracked face. This clock, simple, unassuming, was your signal to commence. All eyes shifted to Lady Hargrave, then to Colonel Walsingham, then to Miss Finch, who shook her head, tears falling. Dr. Bryce looked away, lips pursed in thought. Poirot raised his hand. I shall now retire briefly. When we reconvene at noon. In the gallery, I will present the final connections, how alliances shattered under pressure, and which fracture led to murder. He turned to Grant. Keep the house secured. No one departs. No notes exchanged. As we exited, the suspects exchanged anxious glances, their alliances now exposed, yet their true loyalties still masked. In the silence that followed, I sensed Poirot's satisfaction. His little grey cells had begun to untangle the web of hidden connections, and soon the final strand would yield the killer's name. Chapter 10. Poirot's secret Clutha. Noonday sun streamed through the tall gallery. Windows, when we all reconvened before the great astronomical clock. The brass gears shone dully in the light, and beneath its face, the walnut clock with its fractured porcelain lay on a velvet cushion atop a small pedestal. Inspector Grant stood by with a fresh set of servant's gloves and a magnifying glass. Lady Hargrave, Colonel Walsingham, Miss Finch, and Dr. Bryce formed a semicircle, their faces taut with expectation. Monsieur Poirot surveyed the group, his little grey cells dancing behind his eyes. Ms. Amos, he began, we stand at a pivot in our investigation. You have learned of hidden alliances, financial entanglements, and strategic partnerships, but the true catalyst for murder remains concealed. I have kept one clue reserved for this moment. He moved to the pedestal and lifted the walnut clock with gloved hands. Observe this humble timepiece. He turned it so that the crack in its face caught the light. On first glance, merely a flaw, yet upon closer inspection, there lies a detail unnoticed until now. He held the clock before his magnifying glass and peered intently. The suspects leaned forward. Colonel Walsingham frowned. Lady Hargrave's gloved fingers tightened around her pearls. Miss Finch's breath caught. Dr. Bryce's hand trembled. Slightly, Poirot pointed beneath the crack. At the junction where the porcelain has fractured, note this tiny engraving. He tapped the glass. A maker's marker stylized letter, W, nestled within a faint outline. He traced it with his cane. Not the mark of Mr. Finch, but of the Winchester's rival clockmaker's symbol. A murmur rippled through the group. Lady Hargrave's eyes widened. Colonel Walsingham straightened. Miss Finch stepped back. Dr. Bryce blinked. You see, Poirot continued. The culprit sought to mislead us with the torn glove and the mislaid alloy filings. But in their haste, they overlooked the most telling signature, the foreign engraving on their chosen target. They intended us to believe the walnut clock was merely incidental. In truth, it was the instrument of accusation. He faced Lady Hargrave. Madame, you commissioned Mr. Finch to restore an heirloom clockette. You also acquired replacement parts from the Winchester workshop without his knowledge. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Poirot shifted his gaze to Colonel Walsingham. Colonel, You examined the walnut clock for use in desert conditions. You tested components from Winchester's molds, hoping Mr. Finch's own creation would outperform them. The Colonel's rigid posture relaxed into confusion. Poirot's attention swung to Miss Finch. Eleanor, you discovered the engraving when cataloguing your father's stock. You recognized Winchester's mark and worried that your father's reputation would be eclipsed by a competitor. She pressed her hand to her heart, eyes brimming. Finally, he addressed Dr. Bryce. You advised young Finch to procure more profitable commissions from Winchester parts, arguing that higher fees would cover his expenses. You provided the contact and made the introduction. Dr. Bryce's spectacles slipped down his nose as he swallowed. Poirot held the walnut clock aloft. This engraving reveals the murderer's identity. The gloved hand that placed this clock before me at midnight belonged not to Sir Reginald, but to someone wishing to frame him. He lowered the clock. By planting a clock bearing Winchester's mark, the culprit highlighted their financial conflict with Mr. Finch. He paced slowly before the suspects. Only one among you had access to Winchester's materials and motive strong enough to resort to murder. He stopped before Lady Hargrave. Madame, you feared scandal more than financial loss. Colonel Walsingham, you feared professional embarrassment. Miss Finch, you feared the loss of legacy. Dr. Bryce, you feared the collapse of your practice. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Yet the engraving corresponds to a recent order placed by one of you in order in Finch's books, but invoiced through Winchester's workshop. He stepped close to Dr. Bryce. Your ledger, Doctor, failed to note that you paid for these parts yourself. He held up a small notebook. Here, your own entry, Winchester. Parts 4 client commissions, £50. Dr. Bryce's cheeks flushed crimson. He raised his head, voice shaking. Yes, I did. But I did not kill him. Poirot inclined his head gravely. Motive alone does not prove action, Doctor. But you also planted the glove, knowing Sir Reginald's pharyngeal use would implicate him. You orchestrated the alloy misdirection and authored both midnight notes to disguise your involvement as a larger conspiracy. Dr. Bryce's shoulders slumped. I only meant to protect my practice, to ensure payments for my services. When he threatened insolvency, I panicked. I confronted him in the workshop. He refused to repay me. I struck him with the penknife. A collective gasp rose. The doctor covered his face, shoulders shaking. Poirot spoke softly. Your desperation led to violence. The secondary threat to Lady Hargrave's pearls was to divert attention from the engraving, a miscalculation that revealed your mark instead of obscuring it. Inspector Grant stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on Dr. Bryce's arm. You are under arrest, Doctor. As the constables moved to handcuff him, Lady Hargrave exhaled in relief. Colonel Walsingham swayed thoughtfully, and Miss Finch sank into a nearby chair, pressing her handkerchief to her eyes. Poirot replaced the walnut clock upon its pedestal. He turned to me. Hastings. Ainsley Hastings. The secret clue was the engraving beneath the fracture, small detail overlooked by rush and deception. He smiled, offering his arm to Miss Finch. Justice is served, but the true work of the little grey cells is never done. Together we watched as Dr. Bryce was led away, the gallery's pendulum ticking steadily, constant reminder that in the realm of human motives, even the smallest mark can reveal the deepest truth. Chapter 11. Tensions rise, charged stillness enveloped the gallery as Dr. Leonard Bryce was led away in handcuffs. The great astronomical clock chimed 1, its resonant gong echoing like a drumbeat in the sudden quiet. Monsieur Poirot remained by the velvet-cushioned pedestal, arms folded behind his back, eyes sweeping over the remaining group. Lady Winifred Hargrave, Colonel Amelia Walsingham, Miss Eleanor Finch, Sir Reginald Peabody, and myself, Captain Hastings. Even Inspector Grant and the constables paused, as if reluctant to break the fragile calm, with the murderer unmasked. One might have expected relief and, indeed, relief flickered across Lady Hargrave's face. Yet beneath it lay something sharper. Uncertainty. She smoothed her pearl necklace, jaw set. Colonel Walsingham stood erect, gaze distant, as though calculating her next move. Miss Finch's shoulders trembled as she sank onto a gallery bench. Sir Reginald rubbed his wrists where the handcuffs had bitten into his skin, his expression a mixture of indignation and vindication. Poirot spoke at last, voice even mise. "Amos, the immediate danger has passed, yet the ripples of this drama persist. Emotions run high, alliances shift, and the pressures that drove one man to murder still linger among you." He gestured towards Sir Reginald. "Sir Reginald, you are free to go." The inspector produced a key, removed the cuffs, and Sir Reginald flexed his wrists. He gave Poirot a curt nod, then crossed to Lady Hargrave. "Madame," he said quietly, voice unsteady, "I apologize for any distress my arrest caused." His gaze wavered, and Lady Hargrave responded with a formal nod, mask of courtesy firmly in place. Colonel Walsingham cleared her throat. "I am relieved the true culprit has been found," she declared, though her tone lacked warmth. Her eyes flicked to Sir Reginald, then to Lady Hargrave, before settling on Miss Finch. "May we now address the matter of the exhibition and the proceeds meant for your inheritance, Miss Finch?" Miss Finch lifted her head, cheeks still stained with tears. "Yes," she whispered. I wish only to restore my father's reputation and secure my future." Sir Reginald stepped forward. "I will honor our agreement. The exhibition will proceed, and I will see that the funds reach you in full." He glanced at Colonel Walsingham. "And you, Colonel?" His question was polite, but carried an undercurrent of challenge. The Colonel's lips pressed into a thin line. "I shall contribute, as promised, though I regret the delay." Her eyes met Lady Hargrave's, and something unreadable passed between them. Was it resentment, or merely relief that suspicion had shifted from them both? Lady Hargrave offered a faint smile. "Then we have a resolution of sorts." She paused, drawing a breath. "Yet I find myself unsettled. My pearls, I fear they may never feel safe again." Her fingers tightened around the silk corsage. At her waist, Poirot stepped between them. "The pearls are unharmed, madame. They will be returned to your care." He turned to Miss Finch. "And you, mademoiselle, bear the weight of grief and responsibility. Know that your father's true legacy will endure." Miss Finch managed a small nod, though her gaze remained fixed on the marble floor. I observed the subtle shifts, Colonel Walsingham's planted foot, as though ready to depart. Lady Hargrave's elevated posture, exuding renewed social poise. Sir Reginald's half-smile, mixing pride and relief. Miss Finch's tentative composure. Each reacted not only to the revelation of Dr. Bryce's guilt, but also to their unknown circumstances now laid bare. Poirot lifted his cane, mise Amos. "Before we disperse, there remains the matter of reputations and futures. A murder can fracture trust more deeply than debt ever could. I advise a thorough airing of accounts and intentions, if only to prevent residual resentments from festering." He turned to Sir Reginald. Your factory's bearings for Oneclar, unrelated now to Mr. Finch's demise. However, your involvement in the exhibition may affect your standing. Sir Reginald nodded, face serious. Poirot's gaze drifted to Lady Hargrave. And your philanthropic reputation, madame, may be enhanced by your solidarity with Miss Finch, Lady. Hargrave's lips curved into a small, tight smile. I shall publicly declare my support. Yet her eyes, glancing at Colonel Walsingham, suggested lingering wariness. Poirot moved to Colonel Walsingham. Colonel, your expedition to Egypt deserves celebration once the chronometer is complete. He inclined his head. Your contributions will be acknowledged. The Colonel's shoulders relaxed marginally. Thank you, monsieur. Poirot finally faced Miss Finch. Eleanor, I recommend you assume control of the workshop's operations. Under your guidance, it can flourish anew. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. She met his gaze, gratitude and apprehension mingling. I will do my best. Poirot surveyed the circle. Thus, Mies Amos, the practical matters are settled. Yet emotional tension may remain. I offer one final observation. Trust is not easily restored once broken. I encourage honest dialogue and remedies for any wounds left by suspicion. He stepped back, signalled that the formalities were at an end. Sir Reginald moved to Lady Hargrave, engaging her in quiet conversation. Colonel Walsingham approached Miss Finch to discuss workshop management. I lingered by the walnut clock, eyes drawn to the tiny Winchester engraving, now a silent testament to the case's turning point as guests and staff filed out of the gallery, some in hushed pairs. Others alone the atmosphere crackled with unresolved emotions. The gallery's ticking clocks marked the passage of time, each tick reminding all present that while justice had been served, the bonds of trust required careful renewal. I found Poirot by the door, adjusting his frock coat. The tensions have shifted, my friend, I asked softly. He offered a slight smile. Ah, Hastings, tensions are like gears. Once set in motion, they continue to interact long after the initial force is applied. Our work today has uncovered the murderer, but the true resolution of hearts and fortunes will unfold in the days to come. With that, Poirot swept his gaze over the receding figures and, with me at his side, departed the gallery, leaving behind a tableau of wary alliances and tentative reconciliations. Each suspect forever changed by the revelations of Clarendon House. Chapter 12. The confrontation late that afternoon. After the initial storm of accusations and pleas had subsided, Monsieur Poirot summoned us once more to the gallery. The great astronomical clock's pendulum swung steadily, marking each second with indifferent impartiality, while the walnut clock now returned to its pedestal seemed to gaze down at us with silent judgment. The suspects remained: Lady Winifred, Hargrave, Colonel Amelia Walsingham, Miss Eleanor Finch, and Sir Reginald Peabody. Inspector Grant had detained Dr. Leonard Bryce in a small adjoining chamber, where he awaited formal transfer to the county jail. Poirot stood before the assembly, his posture calm yet charged with the intensity of a man about to spring his final trap. His fingers, clasped behind his back, tapped lightly as he addressed them. Mies Amos, we have observed shifting alliances and uncovered hidden connections. We have revealed the engraving that pointed to Winchester's workshop. Yet one question remains. How did the murderer secure the charcoal black alloy used to stain the glove? And who supplied the penknife found at the scene? At his words, Lady Hargrave pressed a gloved hand to her throat. Colonel Walsingham, Lips tightened. Miss Finch bit her lip, and Sir Reginald straightened, shoulders squaring with latent defiance. Poirot raised one slender finger. The answer lies not in ledger entries, but in human error. He turned to Inspector Grant. Grant, will you fetch the evidence collected at the workshop? The inspector bowed and returned shortly with a small tray upon which lay the torn glove, the penknife bearing faint fingerprints, and 2 vials, one containing the charcoal filings, the other the rare alloy fragments. Grant placed them before Poirot. Monsieur Poirot picked up the glove by its cuff, examining the frayed edge. Notice, he said softly, the tear is irregular, suggesting a struggle within a confined space. Yet the cuff's interior fibers bear traces of a third substance, not metal, but fine strands of silk. He held the glove up to the light. Silk thread from a garment, specifically silk used only in high-quality neck scarves. Lady Hargrave glanced at Colonel Walsingham's cravat, her eyes widening. The Colonel's hand instinctively moved to her collar. Poirot nodded toward her. Colonel, your expedition requisition included a silk scarf dyed in desert hues years to guard against sandstorms. Colonel Walsingham's cheeks coloured. I have worn it once, during my departure from the estate. Precisely, Poirot affirmed. He set down the glove and picked up the penknife. And this penknife, though ordinarily a tool, was selected deliberately. Note the initials scratched into the handle, LF, the clockmaker's initials. He turned the blade gently, revealing a smudge of black alloy at its tip. The murderer used it to stage the scene, but the alloy here matches the charcoal filings, not the rare compound. Our murderer sought to misdirect with exotic materials, but relied on common ingredients for the killing itself. He laid the penknife aside and addressed Sir Reginald. Sir Reginald, you denied involvement with charcoal alloy, yet your factory stores such materials for industrial polishing. Sir Reginald's lips trembled. I dismissed the notion once the apprentice's testimony proved my innocence. Poirot inclined his head. Indeed, Sir Reginald, but you failed to explain the silk fibres on the glove. Sir Reginald swallowed and looked at Colonel Walsingham. Poirot spoke again, turning to Miss Finch. Miss Finch, you were found near the workshop at dawn. You claimed only to seek comfort in your father's presence, yet silk fibres from your travelling shawl were also found on the workshop latch. Miss Finch's face went pale. I did not touch the latch. Gaze softened, perhaps not deliberately, but you held your shawl close around you. Fibers transfer easily in tight spaces. Miss Finch's mouth opened, then closed as tears welled. Poirot raised a hand. Let us consider who possessed motive, means, and opportunity, and whose nerves would betray them under pressure. He turned to Lady Hargrave. Madame, you feared scandal and entrusted your pearls to the workshop. Yet no fibres matching your garments were found on the glove or knife. She exhaled a breath she did not know she'd held. He faced Colonel Walsingham last. Colonel, you alone possessed both the silk scarf and familiarity with the charcoal compound. You would know that common charcoal alloy produces soot easily removed under infrared. You would also know that an authentic desert-hued silk scarf would leave just the fibres we found. The Colonel's rigid posture gave way. She glanced at her friends, then at the glove in Poirot's hand. Her shoulders slumped. All right, she said in a low voice. It was me. A collective gasp echoed. Colonel Walsingham met Poirot's gaze, voice quavering. I confronted Aurelius Finch in his workshop. He refused to use Winchester components, insisted on crafting his own balance springs. He laughed at me, even said that my expedition meant nothing compared to his reputation. I snapped. Poirot nodded. You struck him with the penknife, then attempted to disguise the scene. You dusted common alloys to implicate. Sir Reginald planted the glove and authored the midnight notes to shift suspicion. She drew in a shaky breath. I only wanted him to agree to save my career. When he mocked my request for Winchester parts, I lost control. Sir Reginald looked away, jaw set. Miss Finch covered her face with trembling hands. Lady Hargrave laid a gentle hand on Miss Finch's shoulder. Inspector Grant stepped forward. Colonel Amelia Walsingham, he said, voice steady. I am placing you under arrest for the murder of Mr. Aurelius Finch. He produced a pair of handcuffs. The colonel raised her chin, dignity mingled with shame. Do as you must. As Grant secured her wrists, Poirot replaced the glove and penknife on the tray. He turned to the remaining guests. Mies, Amos, the final crucial mistake was forgetting the silk. The very element meant for concealment became the instrument of exposure. He glanced at me. Hastings, note how the subtleties of human behavior and material evidence coalesce when one probes deeply enough. I nodded, pen flying across my notebook. The gallery's clocks ticked on, their hands oblivious to the drama they had witnessed. Colonel Walsingham was led away, her demeanour composed yet haunted. Lady Hargrave and Miss Finch murmured words of consolation, while Sir Reginald remained silent, absorbing the gravity of yet another betrayal. Poirot stood alone before the walnut clock, studying its cracked face as though in silent conversation. Then he turned to me with a slight smile. Thus concludes the confrontation, Hastings. The murderer unmasked by a silk thread and a common compound proof that in mysteries, the smallest details often bear the greatest weight. With that, he swept his gaze over the gallery one final time, allowing the rhythm of each tick to resonate, a testament to the precision of justice and the unerring logic of the little grey cells. Chapter 13. A desperate attempt to escape had fallen once more over Clarendon House when a jarring alarm shattered the uneasy quiet. In the servants' wing, a solitary lantern bobbed as Constable Willis burst into the gallery, breathless and pale. At his heels stumbled Inspector Grant, the cuffs still clinking on his belt. Monsieur Poirot, Grant called. Dr. Leonard. Bryce, he's escaped. A murmur rippled through the small gathering of household staff gathered by the door. Lady Winifred Hargrave clutched her pearls like a lifeline. Miss Eleanor Finch's eyes widened in alarm. Sir Reginald Peabody straightened with a grim resolve, while Colonel Amelia Walsingham, free on bail for her extortion attempt, folded her arms, face inscrutable. Poirot's little grey cells flickered to life. He raised his gloved hand. Retain. Calm, Mies, Amos. Waziri, he called to the loyal valet who stood ever at his side. Secure the exits. No one leaves or enters without my word. Waziri nodded and vanished into the corridor. Poirot turned to Grant. Tell me precisely where the doctor was held. In the downstairs library chamber, Grant panted. We left him locked inside. While we reconvened here, I assigned 2 constables at the door, but when I returned, the door was ajar, the constables unconscious, and Dr. Bryce gone. A brazen act, Poirot murmured. He strode to the map of the house on the wall, framed floor plan. With his cane he tapped the library, then traced a path through the service stairs and out to the back gate. He followed this route. He will head for the woods beyond the east wing to elude capture. He turned to the staff. Find him at once, but do not engage alone. Grant and I will go with Hastings and to constables. I offered my arm to Miss Finch. You should remain here, Miss Finch, I said gently. We will bring him back safely. She nodded, voice trembling. Thank you, Captain. Sir Reginald approached. Hastings, can I help? I owe an apology to the staff. Poirot shook his head. Your presence here suffices, Sir Reginald. This pursuit is a matter for the constables. He turned to Colonel Walsingham. Colonel, you will stay with Lady Hargrave and Miss Finch, and assist in securing the salon. We cannot afford further surprises. She inclined her head. Of course. Within minutes, we formed a small search party. Poirot, Inspector Grant, Captain Hastings, and 2 constables with drawn lanterns. We descended into the service corridor, which lay in muted darkness save for the flicker of stashed lamps. The corridor's cool air carried a faint smell of damp stone and dust. Grant, Poirot said quietly, consulting his pocket watch, he has a 10-minute head start. At a brisk pace, on foot, he can reach the east gate in 15. We must be faster. Grant saluted. Right behind you, sir. We hurried down the steep service stairs, boots echoing on the stone treads, and emerged into the old library, its door swaying open on its hinges. The room was in disarray. Overturned chair, scattered books, and a broken crystal tumbler. On the floor lay a smear of blood where one constable had fallen. Poirot knelt and examined the blood. Not deep, he struck them lightly. He meant only to flee. He stood and peered through the shattered glass panes facing the east wing courtyard. He leaped through here. He pointed to a low sill with chipped plaster. Follow me. We crossed the courtyard, careful not to graze the thorny rose bushes that climbed the walls. Through a narrow archway we passed into the service yard, where crates of firewood stood in neat piles. Lantern light glinted off a discarded leather glove, the twin to the black glove once found in the workshop. A missed packet. Poirot observed, picking up the glove carefully. He left this in haste, yet he returned Highway. He turned and scanned the looming timber entrance to the east wing, but saw no one. The moonlight revealed only silent windows above. Suddenly, a rustle came from behind a stack of crates. The doctor emerged, breathless and wild-eyed, clutching a small satchelet's bulging form, unmistakably the pearls Lady Hargrave wore. Dr. Bryce's voice cracked as he saw us. You cannot stop me. I need those pearls to finance my escape. Poirot advanced, cane tapping the ground. Dr. Bryce, lay down the satchel and come quietly. No harm need come to you. The doctor's hands trembled. I'll see you ruined. You accused me. You drove me to this. He shook the satchel. I must sell them to get my passage to America. Grant stepped forward, hand on his pistol. Drop the satchel, Bryce. Instead, the doctor lunged toward the tall fence that separated the service yard from the woods. He climbed with desperate energy, fingers slipping on the cold iron spikes. Hastings dashed forward, grabbing his ankle. The doctor's other hand clutched the pearls tightly. Let go, Bryce shouted, struggling to free himself. Hastings held firm, but the doctor's foot slipped, and he dangled perilously. Poirot called out calmly, "Release the pearls and step down carefully, doctor. No one wishes to harm you." The doctor's face contorted with anguish. "Those pearls, they are my ticket." He kicked free his boot, which flew past Hastings. The lantern light glowed off the pearls in the satchel, their luster haunting. In the darkness, I moved beside Hastings and laid a hand on Bryce's shoulder. "It's over, Doctor. We can't let you fall." Slowly, Bryce's resolve wavered. His grip on the pearls loosened, and the satchel tumbled to the ground. The pearls spilled across the cobblestones in a shimmering arc. One pearl rolled toward the fence, and Bryce's eyes followed it. He slumped, exhaustion overtaking him. Grant and the constables moved in swiftly. One constable caught Bryce's arm, the other secured the satchel. Hastings freed his own hands and dusted off his coat. Poirot stepped forward, offering the doctor a hand up. "Come, Leonard," he said softly. "It is finished." The doctor's shoulders shook as he stood. He bowed his head. I am sorry." Poirot nodded gravely. "Regret arrives too late, but it is at least honest." He turned to Grant. "Ensure he is secured and returned to the library chamber. Then, Hastings, assist Miss Finch and Lady Hargrave with collecting the pearls." We escorted the doctor back through the archway, the night air suddenly still. Behind us, the scattered pearls lay gleaming like fallen stars on the cold ground. Once the doctor was back in custody, Hastings and I returned to the gallery, where Lady Hargrave and Miss Finch knelt together, arranging the pearls in a velvet box provided by the butler. "Thank you," Lady Hargrave whispered, passing the box to me. "Without you," I offered a reassuring smile. "They are safe now, ma'am." Miss Finch reached for my hand. I never knew how fragile trust could be. I patted her hand gently. Tonight has shown us that justice must be measured, in actions as well as words. At the doorway, Poirot watched with a quiet satisfaction. "Enksy Hastings," he said softly as we rejoined him. The desperate attempt to escape served only to highlight the truth. Pearls and power may glitter, but human integrity lies in restraint. He gestured to the gallery's clocks. "Let us now return to the salon, where the final reconciliation awaits." Hand in hand, we walked back through the corridors, leaving behind the echoes of pursuit and the glimmer of rescued pearls, a testament to Poirot's unerring anticipation and the enduring strength of the little grey cells. Chapter 14. The final piece falls into place. The hour was late when Monsieur Poirot summoned the remaining participants to the gallery once more. Only Lady Winifred Hargrave, Miss Eleanor Finch, Sir Reginald Peabody, and the subdued Dr. Leonard Bryce remained present, each seated around the walnut pedestal that bore the fractured clock. The great astronomical clock's hands were frozen at midnight, their brass faces catching the flicker of a single lantern perched atop the marble mantel. Poirot stood before them, expression serene yet electric with purpose. "Mies. Amos," he began, "we have seen the threads of motive, means, and opportunity weave a tapestry of deception. We have witnessed the desperate flight and the pearl's rescue. Yet one final piece eluded us until this moment. The precise timing of the murder." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Time itself is the ultimate arbiter." He stepped to the walnut clock and turned it so that everyone could see its cracked face. "Recall that this clock's mainspring was misaligned, its gear teeth subtly worn. Only a practiced hand could detect the irregularity, and only at a precise instant would the malfunction manifest." He tapped the glass. "I tested its mechanism earlier this evening and noted a slight hesitation before the minute hand returned." To its normal sweep, Lady Hargrave inclined her head. "You mean to say that the clock itself tells us when the murder occurred?" Poirot's mouths twitched. "Exactement, but first, consider. This The chronological discrepancy we noted between the alloy filings and the actual compound used. The murderer timed the planting of evidence to coincide with the clock's hesitation, hoping to mask their action in the ensuing confusion. He tapped the side of his cane. Yet I observed that hesitation and recorded its timing 22 seconds between the tick and the tock. Miss Finch's brow furrowed. "And how does that help us, monsieur?" He retrieved a small pocket watch from his coat. Holding it aloft, he clicked it twice, mimicking the irregular beat. The murder weapon, the penknife, was wiped clean, but traces of a delay in its sheath's release remained. I synchronized my watch to this jarred rhythm. The moment of impact corresponds precisely to that hesitation. He glanced at Sir Reginald. "Do you recall arriving in the gallery just as the clock resisted?" Sir Reginald nodded slowly. "I heard a faint grinding sound before the chime. I thought it was just age." Poirot smiled. "Not age, but intent." The murderer approached the workshop, committed the act at that precise instant, then planted the glove and filings moments later, just as the clock resumed its regular beat. He paused to let the group absorb this. Thus, we can reconstruct the timeline. The murder occurred at exactly 11 hours 59 minutes and 22 seconds p.m. and the planting at 11 hours 59 minutes and 45 seconds p.m. Dr. Bryce swallowed, which means I was not alone in the workshop at the time. Poirot's gaze turned to Colonel Walsingham, who stood silently by the doorway, handcuffs still at her wrists. Though her conviction had been decided, her presence here was a reminder that guilt and opportunity sometimes overlap. "Indeed," Poirot said, addressing no one in particular. The assassin required an accomplice, someone to ensure the timing, to distract any watchful eye. He looked at Lady Hargrave. "Madame, you reported hearing voices in the corridor just before you found the body." Lady Hargrave drew in a shuddering breath. "I did. I thought I glimpsed a servant's apron moving swiftly past." Poirot inclined his head. "Not a servant, but the murderer's confederate." He turned to Miss Finch. "Eleanor, you confided that you last saw your father alive while examining his sketches, and that you left to fetch a fresh quill." Her eyes widened. "You passed the workshop door precisely at 11 hours, 58 minutes and 50 seconds p.m., then re-entered at 12 hours, 0 minutes and 10 seconds a.m., finding him no." Miss Finch's voice trembled. I left to retrieve ink, yes. When I returned, I found him dead." "In that 20-second window," Poirot continued, "someone else entered. Their footsteps were muffled but distinct from yours. I found impressions of lace upon the carpet matching the hem of Lady Hargrave's gown. Lady Hargrave's cheeks flushed, yet you were in the salon at dinner until nearly 11:50. Lady Hargrave's composure returned. I excused myself to the gallery to fetch my gloves, which I had forgotten. I intended only to ensure they were placed before the walnut clock." She cast a quick glance at Colonel Walsingham, who averted her eyes. Poirot tapped the frame of the astronomical clock. "Then we must ask, who among us moved so fluidly between rooms, wearing silk lace and desert-dyed scarf, aware of both the clock's delay and the method for masking the crime?" His gaze settled on Sir Reginald. "You claimed to arrive late because of meetings with financiers, yet your coat bore traces of sawdust and iron filings residue from the workshop." Sir Reginald paled. "I arrived early, then left to fetch. Contracts from my study contracts I concealed, fearful they would implicate me in financial mismanagement." He swallowed. I did not kill him." Poirot raised a hand. Indeed, your distress is genuine. You stumbled upon the aftermath, not the deed. He turned to Colonel Walsingham. And you, Colonel, intercepted the timeline. You knew precisely when the jarring tick would occur, having tested the walnut clock yourself earlier that day. You planned the murder to coincide with that hesitation, ensuring any observer would attribute the sound to mechanical fault. The Colonel's lips trembled. You couldn't prove that. Except, Poirot said, producing a slender strip of paper. I timed the clock's lag while conversing with you in the workshop corridor at 9 this morning. You nodded when I noted the hesitation your learned curiosity displayed then, but now used as leverage. He offered her the paper. This pen record bears your shorthand. Clock lags by 22's useful for timing. Her eyes lowered. I did not intend to kill him. I only wished to force his compliance. Yet force turned to fatality. Poirot's voice was gentle, but immutable. He stepped back, allowing the assembled witnesses to absorb the truth. The final piece, the synchronization of human action with mechanical flaw, reveals not only who struck the blow, but why they chose that precise moment. Silence fell, save for the distant ticking of the great clock. Poirot turned to me. Hastings, record their confessions. The little grey cells have done their work. One final piece has indeed fallen into place. He nodded at Colonel Walsingham. Inspector, charge the Colonel with conspiracy to murder an accessory after the fact. Inspector Grant stepped forward, cuffs in hand. Colonel Walsingham offered no resistance. Her head bowed. The other guests exchanged glances, relief mingled with lingering unease as the reality of her orchestration settled upon them. Poirot swept his gaze over the gallery one last time. Mise Amos, in mysteries, as in clocks, the smallest deviation of time can reveal the grandest deception. Let us now prepare for the final gathering, where justice and resolution shall be sealed. With that, the lantern's flame flickered, softly illuminating the watching faces as the last piece of the puzzle clicked firmly into place beneath the watchful gaze of the little grey cells. Chapter 15. The final gathering the following morning, Clarendon House thrummed with subdued anticipation. By 10 o'clock, the grand salon had been arranged for a final assembly. Heavy drapes were drawn to admit the pale autumn sunlight, which fell in diffused shafts across the polished floorboards. At one end, a semicircle of chairs faced a small dais upon which rested the walnut clock, its fractured face, now a silent witness to the turmoil it had inspired. Beside it stood the great guest register and the open ledger of Winchester parts. Monsieur Poirot stood at the centre of the dais, cane in hand, moustaches perfectly waxed, demeanour calm yet infused with quiet energy. Around him gathered Lady Winifred Hargrave, clutching her pearls, Sir Reginald Peabody, shoulders squared but face grave, Miss Eleanor Finch, still pale but composed, Inspector Grant, and the loyal staff, including Butler Fletcher and the housemaids who had first discovered the crime. Colonel Amelia Walsingham and Dr. Leonard Bryce, now formally charged, were present under guard each, seated at the back, flanked by constables. Poirot raised a hand, and a hush fell. Mise Amos, he began, voice resonant, we convene now to reconstruct the true sequence of events so that clarity may follow chaos and justice triumph over confusion. He gestured to the walnut clock. Let us begin at the moment time stood still. He tapped the fractured clock face. At precisely 11 hours, 59 minutes and 22 seconds p.m., Mr. Aurelius Finch was struck down in his workshop by Dr. Leonard Bryce, using a small penknife, originally intended for fine engraving. The blow was sudden and fatal. He paused, allowing the weight of that revelation to settle. Dr. Bryce's motive, a desperate attempt to recoup unpaid medical fees and protect his practice from ruin. Dr. Bryce's shoulders slumped. He averted his eyes as Poirot continued. Immediately after the act, the murderer applied charcoal filings to the penknife and the torn glove materials common to Sir Reginald Peabody's industrial bearings to misdirect suspicion. Poirot picked up the glove from a small table. Beside him, this glove, found by the diagram board, bore only trivial traces of that common compound placed, deliberately, but loosely. He set the glove down and pointed to the ledger. Next, the murderer authored the midnight notes first, luring Monsieur Poirot to the gallery, and second, threatening Lady Hargrave's pearls to sow fear and confusion. The first note, delivered to the salon, drew our attention away from the workshop's true scene. The second, planted on the table, further distracted us while the killer fled. Poirot turned to Colonel Walsingham. Yet this murder was not a solitary act. His gaze sharpened. Colonel, you were the timing and assisting in the misdirection. He tapped the notebook containing her morning annotations. Your entry, clock lags by 22 seconds, useful for timing, reveals that you tested the walnut clock earlier that day. You knew of its deliberate flaw and used it to schedule the crime at a moment when any sound would be attributed to mechanical hesitation. The colonel met his gaze, expression solemn. Poirot continued. You claimed the second note threatened the pearls to distract us further and secure Dr. Bryce's escape. Instead, your involvement only deepened your own culpability. He nodded to Inspector Grant, who took her hands and secured the cuffs. Colonel Amelia Walsingham, you were charged as accessory before and after the fact. A constable stepped forward to guide her away. Colonel Walsingham cast a final look at the assembled grouper, mixture of regret and resignation before exiting in silence. Poirot resumed the narrative. Thus, the true sequence. First, the murder by Dr. Bryce at 11 hours, 59 minutes and 22 seconds p.m. Second, the planting of the glove and first note at 11 hours, 59 minutes and 45 seconds p.m. Third, the planting of the second note in the salon. Fourth, the dispersal of misdirection to implicate others. He paused, eyes sweeping the attendees. Observe how each clue charcoal, filings, silk fibers, alloy samples, engraving, marks, fingerprint residue, to form a web of deceit. He motioned to Miss Finch. Eleanor, you discovered the engraving W beneath the cracker, maker's mark of the Winchester workshop, thus identifying the true source of the parts ordered without Finch's knowledge. Your discovery was pivotal in exposing the financial rivalry that fed the conspiracy. Miss Finch inclined her head, tears welling. Poirot gently smiled. Your grief guided your determination. Through your courage, the truth emerged. He faced Lady Hargrave next. Madame, your involvement was minimal, limited to commissioning the pearl restoration and providing refuge. Yet you endured the terror of threats and the indignity of false suspicion. Your steadfast composure under duress upheld the social dignity of this house. Lady Hargrave bowed her head in gratitude. Poirot turned to Sir Reginald. Sir Reginald, your industrial bearings were a convenient scapegoat, but your integrity remained intact. Your sponsorship of the exhibition and commitment to Eleanor's inheritance demonstrate your honourable character. Sir Reginald nodded, relief evident in his expression. Poirot's gaze then swept the room once more. And now, Ms. Amos, the final act, closure. He placed a reassuring hand on the walnut clock. Let this humble timepiece return to its silent duty. Its crack, once a symbol of fracture, now stands as a testament to the power of observation and human resilience. He raised both hands. Justice has been served. Dr. Leonard Bryce stands condemned for the murder of Mr. Aurelius Finch. Colonel Amelia Walsingham stands condemned for her complicity, and each of you, through courage and candor, has played a part in restoring order. Inspector Grant stepped forward and nodded. This inquiry is concluded, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot inclined his head. Then, Ms. Amos, we may depart with clear consciences and renewed bonds. Let this morning's light guide us beyond the shadows of yesterday's treachery. As guests and staff began to file from the salon, some lingering to offer thanks, others exchanging thoughtful glances, Poirot remained by the dais, eyes fixed on the walnut clock. At last he turned to me. Hastings, the final gathering is complete, he said quietly. Tomorrow we set these things before the public. Record, but for now, let us savor the triumph of truth. Hand in hand with justice and clarity, the company dispersed, leaving behind the fragile clock, its minor fracture, now healed by the steady tick of truth and the unerring precision of the little grey cells. Chapter 16. The Reveal, the Afternoon. Sun cast long, golden beams into the gallery as the final visitors departed. Only Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Grant remained. The walnut clock's fractured face gleaming on its pedestal as though awaiting one last truth. Poirot stood before it, hands clasped behind his back, the little grey cells stirring with final clarity. Ms. Amos, he began, addressing the empty chairs as if they still held the accused and the victims alike. The time has come for the ultimate revelation, when every thread of deception is unravelled before our eyes. He turned to Inspector Grant. Grant, kindly bring forward the evidence once more. Grant produced from a silver tray the torn glove, the engraved penknife, the charcoal filings, the silk scarf, and the ledger entries. He set them respectfully on a small table beside the walnut clock. Poirot walked with deliberate steps to the table, eyes alighting on each item. First, he said, lifting the glove, we have this torn glove, planted to implicate Sir Reginald Peabody. It bore traces of ferronickel filings common in his factory, yet the apprentice's testimony proved those filings accidental. Instead, the glove's true telltale was the silk fibres woven into its cuff fibres, matching Colonel Walsingham's scarf, not the linen of Sir Reginald's work clothes. He laid down the glove and picked up the penknife. Next, the penknife, once belonging to Mr. Finch for engraving, its blade was smeared with charcoal alloy to suggest exotic chemicals. But the alloy was merely household polishing compound, easy to procure, easy to smear. Its purpose was misdirection. The initials LF scratched on the handle were genuine, trap laid by the murderer to frame the clockmaker himself. Poirot placed the knife aside, moving to the filings vials. Here are 2 vials, one of rare alloy, the other of charcoal compound. The murderer intended us to focus on the rare alloy, imagining its presence would direct suspicion toward Colonel Walsingham's chronometer commission. Instead, only the charcoal filings were used at the crime scene, a subtle falsification, intended to muddle our investigation. He lifted the ledger, and here the Winchester ledger entries, orders placed by Dr. Bryce and Colonel Walsingham without Finch's knowledge. Miss Finch's discovery of the maker's mark W. Binet, The crack was crucial, yet the murderer hoped we would overlook that engraving in favor of the more sensational clues. Poirot stepped back, arms sweeping wide as though embracing the entire gallery. Thus, every piece of evidence was part of the grand deception. Symphony of red herrings orchestrated by Dr. Bryce, assisted by Colonel Walsingham. Their motives intertwined. Financial desperation for the doctor, professional pride for the colonel. Together, they plotted to force Finch's compliance. He paused, letting the understanding settle like dust in the air. Dr. Bryce struck the fatal blow at precisely 11 hours, 59 minutes and 22 seconds p.m., synchronized with the walnut clock's hesitation by 22 seconds. Colonel Walsingham, aware of that flaw, ensured the timing and planted threats to cover his escape. They believed their combined guile would conceal the truth forever. At that moment, Inspector Grant opened the library door, admitting Colonel Walsingham and Dr. Bryce, flanked by constables. The colonel's scarf had been removed. Dr. Bryce's hands were cuffed. They stood at opposite sides of the gallery, faces pale and resolute. Poirot surveyed them with measured compassion. "Colonel, you believed your career justified desperate measures. Doctor, you believed your livelihood did likewise. Yet neither counted on the meticulous scrutiny afforded by time itself." He addressed Colonel Walsingham first. "Amelia, you provided the technical knowledge and misdirection. Your entries in my notebook betrayed your intimate familiarity with the clock's flaw. You planted the glove and authored the note to implicate Sir Reginald. You thought your military precision would outmatch my little grey cells. You were wrong." The colonel's shoulders sagged. She met his gaze. I failed to foresee your thoroughness." Poirot nodded sympathetically. "And you, Dr. Bryce," he continued, turning to the doctor. "You struck with a desperate blow, believing the penknife's engraving would absolve you. You wiped its blade, but left traces of charcoal alloy intended to confuse. You took the pearls to finance your flight, yet you could not escape the pull of justice." Dr. Bryce's voice quavered as he replied, "I am truly sorry." Poirot inclined his head. "Remorse, while noble, arrives too late to save the innocent pain suffered. Yet it marks the beginning of accountability." He turned to Hastings. "Hastings, would you share your observations?" I stepped forward. "Monsieur, I noted how each suspect's behavior, defensiveness, hesitation, or overconfidence mirrored the evidence we uncovered. The combination of physical clues and psychological insight led us here." Poirot smiled. "Merci, mon ami. Thus, we see that truth, like a pendulum, eventually settles between the extremes of deception. This reveal closes the chapter on treachery and reopens one on restitution." He addressed the prisoners. "Colonel Amelia Walsingham and Dr. Leonard Bryce, you will stand trial for your actions. Let this reveal guide the courts to justice." Turning to the remaining assembly, Poirot lifted his cane in a graceful arc. "And now, Mess Amos, let us depart this gallery of shadows and return to the light of clarity. The reveal is complete. Our work honors the memory of Mr. Finch and restores the order he sought to maintain." As he concluded, the guests and staff filed out solemnly, leaving the walnut clock and the revealed evidence in the center of the room silent, testaments to the unerring logic of the little grey cells and the enduring power of truth. Chapter 17. Outcome and Justice. The halls of Clarendon House thrummed with a solemn dignity as the court assembled in the drawing-room, repurposed for the day's proceedings. High-backed chairs formed a horseshoe around a sturdy oak table, behind which sat the magistrate, quill in hand and robes draped like sombre curtains. Inspector Grant stood to one side, constables at his back. Lady Winifred Hargrave and Sir Reginald Peabody occupied seats of honour nearest the magistrate's dais. Miss Eleanor Finch sat beside them, composed yet fragile, clutching a folded handkerchief. Colonel Amelia Walsingham and Dr. Leonard Bryce, each flanked by their respective guards, were escorted into the centre of the room. The weight of circumstance etched into their expressions. Monsieur Poirot, his grey coat and immaculate moustaches a testament to unwavering precision, stepped forward with Captain Hastings at his side. The room fell into a hushed reverence as he raised his cane in a quiet gesture of introduction. "Your Honour," Poirot began, voice measured and clear, "we present the culmination of our investigation into the untimely death of Mr. Aurelius Finch. Over the course of these days, we have traced motive, means, and opportunity to two individuals, Dr. Leonard Bryce, who struck the fatal blow, and Colonel Amelia Walsingham, who orchestrated the timing and misdirection. I offer the evidence discovered, the confessions obtained, and the timeline reconstructed for your consideration." He placed before the magistrate the small penknife, still bearing faint traces of charcoal alloy, the torn glove with silk fibres, the ledger entries showing orders for Winchester parts, and the notebook page bearing Colonel Walsingham's timing notes. Each piece was laid out with deliberate care, as though forming a tableau of truth. First, Poirot continued, Dr. Bryce's motive was professional desperation. His unpaid medical fees amounting to a substantial sum threatened both his reputation and livelihood. He approached Mr. Finch at 11 hours 59 minutes and 22 seconds p.m. under the guise of routine consultation. But when refused repayment and confronted with the threat of exposure, he attacked with the penknife. Poirot paused, once again lifting the blade for inspection. The wound was delivered with precision, proving intent beyond any notion of accidental harm. He placed the knife aside. Second, Colonel Walsingham's motive was professional pride and ambition. She sought a chronometer for her expedition, yet Mr. Finch refused to use Winchester's superior parts, insisting on his handcrafted springs. In response, the Colonel tested a flaw in the walnut-clocked 22-second hesitation and timed her accomplice's assault accordingly. She then planted false clues, ferronickel filings to implicate Sir Reginald Peabody, forged notes to threaten Lady Hargrave's pearls, and misleading evidence to obscure the true perpetrators. The magistrate listened intently, brow furrowed. Poirot nodded respectfully before addressing the court. "Your Honour, the evidence is clear. Dr. Bryce and Colonel Walsingham conspired to commit and conceal murder, violating both the sanctity of life and the codes of honour they profess to uphold." Inspector Grant stepped forward, producing a pair of official orders. "Your Honour, we request that Dr. Leonard Bryce be committed for trial on the charge of wilful murder. Colonel Amelia Walsingham shall be tried on charges of accessory before and after the fact, conspiracy, and attempted extortion." He handed the documents to the magistrate. The magistrate scanned the papers, then looked upon the accused. He tapped his quill against the desk and spoke in a tone both grave and measured. "Dr. Bryce, you stand accused of the unlawful taking of a life with premeditation. Colonel Walsingham, you stand accused of planning and abetting that crime, and of seeking to extort property through threats of violence." He paused, eyes sweeping the room. "Do either of you wish to speak before I commit you to trial?" Dr. Bryce, voice trembling, rose first. His posture was humble, shoulders slightly bowed. "Your Honour, I offer no excuse for my actions. My desperation clouded my judgment. I regret deeply the harm I have caused to Mr. Finch's family, to those who dignify this house, and to my own honor. I accept full responsibility and submit to your justice." The magistrate inclined his head. "Your remorse will be noted." He turned to the colonel. Colonel Walsingham stood with unconscious grace, but her eyes flickered with remorse beneath the stoic mask. "Colonel, do you have words to address these charges?" She drew a steadying breath. "Your Honor, I underestimated the darkness of my own ambition. I believed I could orchestrate events with precision and honor, yet I failed both Mr. Finch and myself. I sought control, not blood, yet my actions facilitated a grievous crime. I accept responsibility and will face the consequences." A respectful silence followed her statement. The magistrate set down his quill and reached for his official seal. "Very well. Dr. Leonard Bryce and Colonel Amelia Walsingham are hereby bound over for trial at the next session of the Crown Court. Bail is refused." He rapped his gavel. "Court is adjourned." A rustle of silk and a murmur of acceptance swept through the room. Inspector Grant stepped forward and signaled to the constables, who guided the doctor and the colonel from their seats. As they passed, Lady Hargrave and Miss Finch each lightly touched the magistrate's desk in a gesture of silent thanks for the restoration of order. Sir Reginald Peabody rose and approached Poirot with sincere gratitude. "Monsieur Poirot, your insights have spared me and so many others from grave injustice. I owe you my deepest thanks." Poirot inclined his head, expression modest. Miss Finch stood beside her, voice soft but steady. "Thank you, Captain Hastings, for your unwavering support, and thank you, Monsieur Poirot, for honoring my father's legacy and safeguarding my inheritance." Hastings nodded, his heart warmed by her words. The magistrate rose from his bench, gathering his robes. "May justice be done swiftly and fairly in the ensuing trials. You may all depart." As the assembly dispersed, the weight of truth lingered, in the air heavy with loss, yet lightened by the certainty of justice. Poirot paused at the doorway, gazing back at the oak table now strewn with the relics of conspiracy. He smiled faintly at Hastings. "Ainslie Hastings, the outcome is delivered by the hands of law, but it was reasoned here in the realm of observation that guided the path to justice." Hastings placed a companionable hand on Poirot's shoulder. "Your little grey cells have yet again proven invincible, mon ami." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "And so the gears of law may now engage, unimpeded by deceit." With that, he turned and followed the departing guests into the corridors, where the morning light shone more brightly, promising that even the darkest deeds cannot long resist the clarity of justice. Chapter 18. The closing remark a week later. The last leaves of autumn drifted across the courtyard of Clarendon House as guests gathered once more beneath its portico. The gallery, where shadows had danced with deceit, was now arranged for a modest reception, a celebration of renewed trust rather than a tribunal of suspicion. Lady Winifred Hargrave and Sir Reginald Peabody stood by the walnut clock's pedestal, its cracked face mended by professional restoration, but still bearing the faintest trace of its maker's marker. Reminder of lessons learned. Miss Eleanor Finch, her dark morning gown exchanged for a gown of soft lavender, greeted each attendee with gentle grace. By her side stood Captain Hastings, pen and notebook replaced by a supportive arm and a warm smile. The workshop's business had been reorganized under her careful oversight, and orders for Finch's exquisite timepieces now flowed steadily. from appreciative clients, Colonel Amelia Walsingham and Dr. Leonard Bryce. Both, after serving their sentences, had relinquished claims to the workshop's future. Colonel Walsingham returned only to offer her sincere apologies and to fund an annual scholarship for aspiring young clockmakers, an act of restitution that spoke of humility and redemption. Dr. Bryce, having paid his debt to society, resumed his medical practice with renewed ethics, offering pro bono consultations to those in need. Monsieur Hercule Poirot stood near the great astronomical clock, now ticking reliably in radiant brass. He wore his usual frock coat, moustaches perfectly styled, and held his cane lightly in one hand. He surveyed the assembled company with a serene expression, part triumph, part kindly reflection. As the guests circled around him, he lifted a delicate crystal flute of champagne. "Mise Amos," he called, voice clear yet warm. "We gather not to commemorate tragedy, but to honor resilience. Through clouds of suspicion, we found clarity. Through fractures of trust, we forged stronger bonds." He paused, raising his glass. "To truth and to the wisdom gained by those who seek it." Glasses tinkled, and a ripple of laughter and relief passed through the crowd. Hastings leaned toward Poirot. "You always knew how to bring people back together, didn't you, mon ami?" Poirot smiled, tapping his cane gently on the marble floor. "Ah, Hastings, unity is but the harmonious tick of well-adjusted gears. When each part, each person functions in concert, the mechanism of society runs smoothly." Lady Hargrave approached, offering Poirot a small gift, a golden pocket watch engraved with his initials. "For your service," she said softly. "May it keep perfect time, as you have kept our affairs in order." Poirot accepted it with a gracious bow. "Merci, madame. This token shall remind me always of the fragile yet precious nature of time and trust." Miss Finch stepped forward next. "Captain Hastings," she said, offering him a ribbon of lilac silk as a token of friendship. He accepted, touched by the gesture, and she squeezed his arm in gratitude. Sir Reginald Peabody raised his glass to Monsieur Poirot and Captain Hastings, whose little grey cells and steadfast hearts restored justice and kindness to our lives. The guests echoed the toast, voices warm and sincere. Poirot dipped his head, then turned to the walnut clock, its face now luminous in the late afternoon light. "And to this humble clock," he said, voice playful, "which taught us that the smallest crack can reveal the greatest truth. May we all heed its lesson, that in matters of mystery and of life, every detail, however slight, deserves our utmost attention." He pocketed the golden watch and stepped back. "A bean, Hastings, our duty is done. Let us take our leave before the clock strikes 5 lest we overstay our welcome." I offered my arm, and together we strolled toward the gallery's doorway. Ahead, the guests mingled with renewed warmth, the house alive with gentle conversation and the promise of peaceful days ahead. As we stepped into the soft glow of the courtyard, Poirot looked to the horizon where the sun slipped beneath amber clouds. He straightened his shoulders and said, with his characteristic flourish, "Après vous, mon ami, until the next puzzle presents itself." And we set our little grey cells to their noble task once more. And with that, Hercule, the master of deduction, and Captain Hastings, his loyal companion, departed. Clarendon house leaving behind a restored world in which time, truth, and trust marched forward, ever in perfect synchrony.